Hello and welcome. Coming to you from the Feywilds, I'm Josh.
And I'm John, and I didn't realize Mimic Meat tasted this good.
I find it kind of chewy. But this is the Geek ETC podcast, where we dive into all things you can geek out about. So, have you heard of this new game, Hi-Fi Rush, that just came out?
I've heard of it. I don't know anything about it.
So, Xbox had this event the other week where, they talked about, upcoming games that they're releasing, some release dates for stuff. They mentioned, the new Forza game didn't come out with a release date for it, which is kind of dumb. There was no talk of Starfield, which we had mentioned in the past, but they did say that Starfield's going to have its own event later in the year, and who knows, at that time they'll probably say a release date. So that's exciting. But they did something that they haven't done in a while, really since Fallout Shelter came out on mobile. However many years ago that came out. That's been a while.
Yeah, right when that came out, right with Fallout 4, didn't it?
It was like either it may have been right before or right after to kind of hype for the game.
Yeah, it was definitely a hype thing for the game. I think it came out with it. Maybe it was like a launch, like a side-by-side launch with it.
It very well could have. But what they did on that game was they, no one knew about it, no one heard about it. They just announced it at the show, and everybody's like, "Oh man, that looks awesome!" And at the end of the presentation, they're like, "By the way, it's out right now." And everybody in the place is freaking out. All the game journalists, went to download it and are like quickly writing up articles like, "This new game just came out right now." So they did that with this game, Hi-Fi Rush. The same deal. Like, there's been no marketing on it. No one knew about it. Apparently, it's been in development since 2017.
Oh wow! So like Flappy Bird. Is this from the same Flappy Bird developer?
Unfortunately, no. Because then if you could download it on your Xbox, and then they would get rid of the game, and you could sell the Xbox for like 10 times the amount because it still has that game on it.
Real quick tangent. I think Bella Ramsey, who plays Ellie in the new Last of Us series on HBO, she still has it on her iPad. And that's what she said. She's like,
Flappy Bird?
She has Flappy Bird. She still has it. She still plays it. And then she knows she could sell it for a bunch of money. But
yeah, it was an interesting period of time when people were selling iPhones with Flappy Bird still on it for exorbitant amounts of money. Anyway, so this game, it's similar to, I don't know if you ever had a chance to play something like Jet Set Radio or what's the game that just came out on Xbox a few years ago?
I played Boom Boom Rocket with you, I think.
That was kind of a rhythm game. That was more kind of a Guitar Hero type of deal. Sunset Overdrive.
Okay, so
I'm talking about.
I think I've seen some Sunset Overdrive. Yeah,
the stylization of those games, Jet Set Radio and Sunset Overdrive, it's a different developer, but it's kind of a spiritual successor. It's a mix of those two, but it's a rhythm-based game that everything in the world is moving to this beat. It is steady beat. In like all the environments, the lights, steam coming out of machines, the machines around you and stuff, it all moves to the same beat. And whenever you attack, you're fighting these robots and stuff, and whenever you attack them, if you hit your attacks on this beat rhythm and this beat, it'll give you bonuses. It doesn't really penalize you for not getting it on the beat, but if you do and you can match it with the songs that are playing, then it will build up this kind of combo meter where you can do these like extra powerful attacks. And it's really kind of an interesting concept as a rhythm-based game, because there hasn't been a lot of things like this. But I've checked it out. I played it a little bit and have really enjoyed it so far. I haven't got maybe a couple hours into it, but it's apparently like a 20-hour game or something from what I've heard from people reviewing it.
Wow.
But I've really enjoyed it. I know it's a pretty big hit, especially for something that had no marketing around it at all.
Is it a free game?
Yeah, it's on Game Pass.
Oh, that's right. You said it was on. Yeah, it's on Xbox.
Yeah, so they released it on Game Pass, and that's how they were able to, at the show, essentially say, and it's out now. You can just go download it, because all they had to do was flip a switch and make it available for Game Pass. But it's a really cool concept if you're into music at all. And they also have, they've signed a bunch of specific songs from artists and stuff, like the Black Keys and things. They have it, like the game opens with a Black Keys song. And so they have some cool music in it as well. I'm sure there's more later in the game I haven't got to, but you also get some companions in there that you meet. That there's a cute little robot cat that kind of follows you around. His name is 808, which for music junkies, music geeks, I guess, to be topical, you'll understand what that means.
I don't, so tell me.
It references a type of drum beat used in various music productions and things for electronic artists.
Well, who doesn't like a robot cat? You
right.
know? And there's no litter box, which is like the biggest problem I have with them. They hate me because for some reason small animals just don't like me because I'm so big.
They really don't.
But also, I don't like the smell of a litter box.
No. I remember my sister's dog. She used to have a Chihuahua that was scared to death of you.
I never did anything to the dog. It was just like a natural reaction to something. It's like I didn't think those things existed still. You know, like some big lumbering,
right? A storm giant or something.
Yeah. From
his perspective.
Yeah.
The artistic styling of it is really cool. It looks like a cartoon. It's kind of cel shaded in a way, almost sort of 2D in a 3D world aspect.
Wasn't there a game back in the day that was like, what was that one? Okay, I think I'm thinking of that like breakdancing, like graffiti artist guy or whatever.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but that was like a hip hop game, wasn't it? Like a hip hop squirrel or rabbit or kangaroo. Or
I hate that I can't remember.
I hate that I can't either. And you guys run a geek podcast, but I forgot what it is.
I never played. I think it was a PlayStation game, and so I never had it.
Oh yeah, I think it might have been a PlayStation game.
Parappa the Rapper.
Parappa the Rapper.
I literally just remembered it off the top of my head.
That's it.
I was like, I have to go into my mind palace to find this information. I know it's in there.
That's what I'm picturing is Parappa the Rapper fighting the robots from Generation Zero to a musical beat.
Right. Did you ever play a game called Beautiful Joe?
No.
Do you remember that? I think I had it on GameCube. That was completely 2D and cel shaded, and they desperately need to make another one of those. That game was amazing. You could control time and a lot of bullet time type of stuff. You're a superhero. But yeah, it's a 3D world, and you have a guitar that you fight people with. It's like a flying V guitar that you can bash people with. But it's it's kind of casual, but it has some humor elements in it as well. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and it even kind of like makes fun of itself sometimes, which is cool.
So like a self-deprecating melee-based bard is what you're telling me.
In a way, it's not super self-deprecating. That may be a little harsh, but it's definitely more lighthearted and fun and happy compared to kind of the last sort of hit like this that we had, High on Life. You know, that was a much more different type of humor. But it's been really fun so far. But for anyone who has Game Pass, I definitely suggest, or if you like music, you like rhythm games at all, definitely download it and check it out.
Not a sponsor.
No, not sponsored. Just a cool little pick that I've happened to play over the past couple weeks. I really enjoyed it though.
Well, I will try it, and I'll be bad at it because I am. You tried to teach me how to drum once. Josh is the geek, the music geek in this group, and he's quite the bass player, good guitar player. He's got a mind for all that. He has the ear for it, but I can't hold a beat to save my life. I can't even clap in rhythm with people at like a sporting event, so I would do horrible.
But what you could do was play Guitar Hero 3 on a controller.
On the controller specifically, yeah. I was really fast at those buttons.
Because we were too poor at the time to be able to afford both the game and a guitar controller.
I'm also really good at naming bands. Spitting at Spiders, that was our band, I think. Arrogantly Aardvark.
That was another good one. I feel like there was a couple more.
We had a bunch.
It's been so long.
We had a lot of them.
Those two were two of the better ones for sure.
Yeah, I could play on the controller. Which I guess you should be able to. Yeah, since it's just a controller, there's not that much dexterity to it.
Right, you're just hitting the 4 buttons, and that basically played that as the little colored circles would come down the track. There would be one assigned to each bumper and trigger.
I'm really good with a bop it too. If it says twisted, I'm doing it.
Oh, I was never good at those.
Simon Says, remember the little circle, like the Simon Says
the 4 buttons?
Yeah, remember that?
I don't have the memory for that. You have a pretty good memory though, so
I do.
imagine
Elephant never forgets.
Jesus.
The,
Speaking of self-deprecating.
Yeah, but I like the. I think Among Us had like that as one of the tasks you could do. Is like Simon Says, like boop boop boop, and you had to remember that. I was always really quick. Sometimes I was so quick with it, like I got it done so fast, people don't think I was the imposter.
I wasn't too bad at those Simon Says things because of that musical thing, that I would hear the beat in my head, hear that rhythm, and I could just memorize what the beat and the tones were. And then go off that.
Between the two of us.
If we just put a Simon Says between us, and we play co-op Simon Says.
Let's play couch co-op.
Couch co-op
Simon Says.
Is that a thing?
Is there a championship for that in Korea or something like that? Do they have that?
I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah.
They're better at everything than us. But we need to try that. It seems pretty cool. You know what else is pretty cool?
What's that?
Money.
It is cool.
Yes, money is very useful in today's world, and it is very useful to us as well. So if you would like to support us as a show and a podcast, we now have a Patreon. We just set that up. It is patreon.com/geeketcpodcast. You can go there and support us and support the show, and that helps with things such as, the equipment to do it, audio,
buying games, doing game giveaways, that kind of stuff, as well as just like general like overall costs.
Yeah, audio production, some of the design work into some of the stuff that goes into the show. There's turns out, doing something like this, there's some costs involved in it. So
that is true. That is very true. And, the thing is, too, one of the things with like a viewer-supported podcast is what we're going for. Is
right.
We're not going to be trying to hit you with advertisements.
No.
Other than ourselves, because we hope you want to listen to us for us. And so we don't want to be hitting you with being sponsored or doing something just to cover some of the costs that we could not maybe swing on our own indefinitely.
Right. There's nothing to me more frustrating than listening to a show and then their conversation suddenly being interrupted to talk about, some mattress or some kind of, vitamin supplement or something like that. And then jumping randomly back into the conversation. So it's our goal here at Geek ETC to not ever have to do that. So, but that is up to you guys. You can help us with that. So if you would like to support the show, you can head over to patreon.com/geeketcpodcast and sign up. And when you do that too, coming up here soon, we'll have some exclusive things specifically for patrons that sign up there. You can get some early bonus content, some extra content that's not available anywhere else. We're still kind of fleshing that out.
Yep, things like we're working on our Dungeons and Dragons podcast that we've been we're trying to curate really well.
Right. And so with that, you may have access to some bonus one-shots or some behind-the-scenes content around our D&D campaign that we're going to be coming out with. So be on the lookout for all that. But go sign up and help us out.
And this week we are actually geeking out about Dungeons and Dragons.
That's
more specifically, We're talking about classes and kind of like a little bit of intro to it. And this is almost, we've done like 3 episodes where there was a lot of introduction about me and Josh and I. And, last week we talked about Hogwarts Legacy and we talked about the new video game, but, Dungeons and Dragons, even still is a very hot topic. And, coming out here in March, there's going to be a movie coming out. And
that is still coming out.
That's right. Didn't it, like the something of Thieves,
Honor Amongst Thieves.
Honor Amongst Thieves, Dungeons and Dragons. And so it is, whether it does like an actual campaign justice or whatever, it'll be interesting to see. But other people might have seen it. Maybe you're watching Vox Machina on Amazon.
Yeah, The Legend of Vox Machina.
The Legend of Vox Machina from Critical Role right now. Maybe you've seen Stranger Things for the 10th time and you've seen it there. We got to talk about what is Dungeons and Dragons and a little bit about what TTRPG is in general. And then we're going to kind of get you guys into some classes because we want you to be able to kind of understand what these things are if you're trying to get into a gameplay, and maybe even where you play a game at. Maybe you don't have people near you. Maybe you don't have a group of friends to play with, and we can tell you how to do that too.
Yeah, well, Dungeons and Dragons was one of those things that I always had an interest in, but it seemed kind of overwhelming to me when I was younger, that it seemed that there was just so many different aspects and rules and ways to play. And then on top of that, not knowing who to play with and stuff, it just seemed overwhelming. But now that we've done it a good bit, there's definitely routes to take that are very beginner friendly.
Very much so.
Very easy ways to get into it and play.
Yeah, and the first time I ever played Dungeons and Dragons, I was fairly young, maybe 6th grade, and I remember it was like a youth pastor guy, and I remember being like at his single wide trailer and watching Dragon Ball Z, and he had like we're eating Pizza Hut and Mountain Dew. Like it was a very interesting time, and I remember being so bound to like the rules of certain games and things. And one of the things I thought was so neat, I remember there was a situation where we were playing with, there was like a couple of older kids who were like in high school. And so they had a little better critical thinking than I did. And I remember it was all theater of the mind. And what that is that's when everything there's a dungeon master who guides you on your journey and sets up some base rules and kind of tells you what you can and can't do, but they also help guide you to what you can do. And the system is based on a 20-sided dice, right? That's right. It is a D20 system. And so typically you roll like a 20-sided dice, and that determines your success or failure on certain things. And sometimes you don't even need to roll one. Right. And then, then there's additional dice for certain weapons. Do a 6-sided dice of damage, whatever number you roll on there. Yep. It would deal damage for that. And I remember we were in a situation and we were outside of some building in that scenario. And I was playing some like dwarf cleric who had like a hammer and like scales, like justice scales. I don't remember what class it was. I think it was a cleric or a paladin or something like that. Something fairly simple. I don't remember anything about it, name, whatever. But I do remember is this older kid. We were in this situation. It was really bad, right? It was like, oh, we're gonna get killed, and we had made it outside, and all the bad guys were still in this building. And I remember the teenager was like, what's the building made out of? And the dungeon master was like, wood. And he held out his hands in a burning motion. He had a spell called Burning Hands, and he held out his hand, and to him he was just like, I'll burn the whole building down. And I remember thinking like, oh, I didn't know it was, I'm used to like, you got to attack this person or do whatever. Yeah. That left an impression on me, that unique way to play. Like, oh, I'm going to just burn the whole building down.
You got to think outside the box is what, you typically think could be, doable in a game, especially if you're a big video gamer. There's often a rule set as to what you can do and not do in a game, such as, structural damage.
There literally is code, there's a code that you can't do certain things. You can't walk indefinitely into the sunset. You can't, unless you're Minecraft, you can't go and maybe destroy a building because the building's indestructible, right? Right. But in this game, in a lot of ways, that's all dependent on your dungeon master, your game master, and the scenario, like the situation that you're in. And, if it's one of those things where you have an imagination or maybe you feel held back, even playing something like Skyrim, like Josh talked about in one of his top 10 favorites, it's one of those games where even still,
there's a lot you can do in it.
There's a lot you can do,
but you're still held within the bounds of the code of the game.
Yeah, there's going to be like the same 5 finishing kills, or what slow motion things you do, right? Or the same dialogue. Maybe you would be like, I bet I could make a better argument than these 3 options that I have. Right. And that's the cool thing about TTRPGs, specifically Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, which is what we're going to be talking about today, is that you have the ability to do what you want, and hopefully if if it's not something silly, but you have the ability to make it your own.
If you can think of it and think of something cool to do to solve a scenario or a situation, or to further your progress in a situation, if you can think of it, you can propose it as an opportunity. And then at that point, it's up to your GM to decide, they may, think, that's a really cool idea. Let's see if it works.
Yeah, exactly. And so Dungeons and Dragons is a TTRPG, or tabletop RPG, right? Just like a board game or something like that, except it doesn't have to be.
You're saying typically, for a lot of its life, it was a tabletop game that you had many figures, that you would play, and you would have a map, a board that you would, do the battles on, and that could even be a piece of paper that you drew, a lake and some trees on, or You could have physical, maps with terrains printed on them to play on, and have little trees or castles you would set on them to fight against bad guys. But in today's modern technology, that's advanced quite a bit.
Yeah. And so in those, like, when we talked about actual tabletop, you could be on there and you move your character around, but you're still looking at it from like, that's just a piece of grid paper or whatever. The dungeon master will hopefully be setting the setting so you can imagine the other things, that it's not just grid paper. It is a desolate swamp. There's frogs croaking. There's, you hear water rushing, and through the fog, you see a figure moving, right? That's the things that we're looking for. We're looking for that kind of thing. And it's so fun that when you get that, your mind is transported to somewhere else. And it's one of those games that when you play it, you're not going to be able to think about the outside world. That stuff's not going on.
It's kind of like reading a book. If you're a big book reader and into stories and stuff, especially fiction, as you're reading it, that narrator or that author is setting a scene, and they'll describe lots of little details and aspects like that to help you picture what you're reading in your mind, and to create that scenario in your head with your imagination to put yourself in the situation. It's the same thing with a GM running a D&D game.
And ideally what you're doing is you're working with a party of typically less than 6 or less people. Now, I've seen games that have more than 6. I think those can be a little unwieldy personally, because then there's 8 people trying to like really get in, plus a dungeon master, so that makes a 9th person.
It takes a good dungeon master to do that,
reel it in, and some like quality other players who aren't going to totally, if you're the quiet introverted person, and then there's 4 people who are really loud, then you might become kind of like a secondary character, and that's not a fun thing to do.
Not at all.
So when you create a character, you get to decide where they're from, their background,
who they are,
like what is their thing. And the most key important thing whenever you're creating a character, the most important thing is, why are they an adventurer? Why are they out on their own? Why are they with this group? Why are they willing to do this? Why are they not at home? Why are they not working at a bank? Why are they not working in a smith shop? What happened? Maybe it's just you wanted to. You're just like, you could be a happy character that just is like, I want to see the world. Wanderlust, right?
Yeah.
We'll look at real world examples. But, a lot of people take the more edgy route. It could be like, I was kicked out. My family was killed. My mom died, whatever.
The village was burned down.
Was burned down. Or you could have this sense of honor. Whatever it is, you decide. Not the dungeon master, not the player's handbook. You decide some of your background. Now, there are specific backgrounds that give you a little bit of extra stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to be your primary. Like, if you say you grew up in a big city, but then you moved to a forest and you kind of were a forester, there's a background for that, right? Where that gives you those kind of like forest, gives you like, proficiencies with nature, or survival, right? Where if you're rolling to see if you see a monster, or
to navigate through some fog.
Navigate the fog, or see if the water is clean to drink, or something like that. You were able to do that better than somebody who didn't grow up in that situation.
And those backgrounds can often more just serve as a guide, not necessarily a permanent definition of your character, but more just a guide to kind of a filter to apply on top of your character that you've made to kind of maybe help hone them in a little bit and kind of make it more of a polished thing.
Absolutely. And so with that, so when you think, the cool thing about this is, think about what your character is, what they like doing, who they are, how they act around other people. Is there certain things that they hate? Is there certain things that they like? Is there certain things they won't stand for? Is it something that they're having to grow? And really try to embody that character. So when we say TTRPG, the RPG stands for role-playing game. And that's what it is. You get to become that person. Yeah. And if you've got a good group or even a bad group, become that person. If you want to change your voice, change it. If you can't change your voice, say that I sing in a really deep voice, or whatever. Become that person and really, really, really dive into it. And you'll find that game is so meaningful and so much fun. My favorite thing is being able to do that, is being able to change who I am. And, just like these other games we've talked about in the past. We've talked about Hogwarts Legacy. We've talked about our top 10 video games. Several of those included RPGs.
Yes.
We were still bound by the coding of those games set up by people that aren't ourselves, right? Dungeons and Dragons, the 5th edition, like the rule set, you get your basis, you get your kind of like, this is how combat works, this is how certain roles work, this is how some things are set up, but make it your own. And that's one of the things I love about it is you get to do that. It is a scaffold, and you get to build the building inside of that, and you get to build it however you want it and make it whatever you want. And so making your character, there's lots of things that go in. So whenever you're making a character for Dungeons and Dragons, we're looking at a couple things. What race do you want to be?
Right.
Do you want to be an elf? Do you want to be a high elf? Do you want to be a wood elf? Do you want to be a dwarf? Do you want to be
a human? A
human, yeah. Humans kind of get a lot of hate not hate, but it's a silly. Everybody's like, well, this world, a fantasy world, is full of all these things, and people just want to play a human fighter. If they do, yes, let them.
Why would you want to just be a human? Well, there's a lot of good aspects to that. They get some cool bonuses and stuff I might talk about, but
they definitely do get some cool bonuses. And the other thing is too, it's one of those, I think playing a human starting out is one of those things that it's probably a little bit easier for the newcomer.
I was going to say that as far as a starter race for someone just getting into it, that's, to me, I feel one of the best races to pick, because that's one less role-playing aspect you have to even think about. Like we all know how to be a human, because we are them, but you might not know how a dragonborn, would act or talk or, present themselves or, live in the world, what they eat, how they sleep, all those kinds of things. So that's, a lot of extra stuff you have to come up with and create. Whereas if you're a human, you've got 90% of it down. You just have to, be a human.
So when you're getting into the game, when you talk to a dungeon master, whether it's in person, maybe you're going to join your friends group for the first time. Maybe you're going to play online on something like a TTRPG simulator like Roll20.com or, Let's Play Games or something like that. Owlbear Rodeo, I think there's a few others. If you're going to go on those and do that, talk to your dungeon master about their creation rules. Maybe they have some interesting creation rules. Maybe they have a level start. Some people start at level 1. I prefer a level 3 start. That way everybody has their own subclass, which we'll talk about in depth here in a minute.
Right. They have a lot of homebrew rules. Like there's a standard set of rules, but many times different GMs will slightly add something or take something away just to kind of mix it up. And for instance, there's a weight system in Dungeons and Dragons. This is how much your character is able to carry on their weight. That's a thing that common times GMs will just completely negate or ignore, because we don't want to have to figure out and deal with people being over encumbered, or can you carry all this?
Well, I think it's good to think of, yes, exactly. Like if your backpack's too heavy, that's one thing, but it is something, and I will say this as a GM too, it is sometimes something I will just use against you when the situation is right. When you're hanging from a branch, I might ask you, like, how much does your backpack weigh plus you?
Right.
Well, that branch begins to snap, right? That you hear a crack.
Right.
And you watch as the limb begins to sway downward when you're, then you got to decide what you're going to do with it. And
do you drop your backpack and lose all your stuff, but save yourself?
Ooh.
You kind of have to make decisions. So there's definitely pluses and minuses to having some of those extra things in there or not.
Yeah. And so you choose your, choosing your race and then looking at classes, looking at backgrounds and saying, like, I want to be a human wizard. I want to be a human sorcerer. Whatever. I want to be a dragonborn sorcerer. You look at each race has their, I think they're calling it something else in the new Dungeons Dragons system coming out. They're not calling them races anymore. They're calling them something else, nationalities or something a little bit more user friendly. I don't know. We'll be saying race in this because that's what I'm most familiar with us in the 5th edition guide.
Right.
So when you choose that race, you look and there's a lot of different things that you get. For example, a dragonborn gets a breath weapon, right? They get to choose their elemental affinity. If you're a red dragonborn, maybe you breathe fire and it comes out in a cone. And you can do that so many times per day, or maybe you can do it as an attack or whatever. there's lots of different things that, like, each race has a unique thing to them, and it makes it fun to role play. Maybe, you know, you're somebody that was raised by another race, and so you still have your racial attributes, but maybe you act differently.
I never even thought about a character that was, you know, say a human but was raised by elves.
Well, when we get to a fighter, I'll talk to you about one of my builds that I have. That
Okay.
I like. But it's those. It's so nice, and then you decide what your character looks like, and there is no scale, there is no sliders in a video game to where you you just give up or randomize it until you're like, yeah, that's good enough. You choose every aspect of how you look like, or you get to take away something. You know, some people get so overwhelmed by the choices that it takes it away. Just look at pictures and be like, my guy looks like this, right?
Yeah, if you found a picture of some cool art someone had made online, this is, you think that looks cool, that's what you look like. All right, sounds good.
Exactly. You know, and if you want to be wearing blue, you know, a blue dress with green hemming, then you're wearing that. You know, you're wearing that starting out. You get to choose what that's like. If you have a background of a knight, you get to choose what your heraldry looks like. You know, do you have 2 crossed swords, or is it a horse on a green background? You get to choose all of that. There's nothing. That's what's so nice, is there's nothing to keep you from being able to do that. There's no presets. There's no DLC to unlock. It is all your choice.
And at the same time, though, that, you know, if you don't want to get super detailed with that, you also don't have to. You know, you can put as much time or effort into designing your character that you want to. If you want, you know, I'm a regular male human with brown hair, you know, I wear some leather armor, and, you know, I'm a farmer. Yeah. Then, okay, cool. That's your character.
That's it. Matter of fact, I think I was looking at your character's bio last night, and we play on Roll20, and I Dungeon Master on there, and I was looking at Tartarus, your Minotaur, who's a barbarian and multi-class with a special class that we came up with for you.
Right.
I was looking at it last night, and, you know, in your character appearance section, it just says, like, I'm 7-something foot tall, 350 pounds. I'm a big thing, and I carry a double-headed axe. Right. That's all it says. Yeah. I added some more stuff to it last night that you'll find out today.
Oh.
But the, you know, you didn't go that much into detail, but you still really do a good job embodying that character. And I think if I asked you something about your character, even though you don't have it written down, if I said, Josh, what color is your belt? You would be able to tell me what the belt color is.
Yeah, it's a brown leather with a gold filigree around it.
There we go. So it's
I just made that up, you know, just now. That, I have this image in my head of what he looks like, so you just kind of focus down on, you know, well, what would the belt look like, and what do I want it to look like? That's what I want it to look like. So, boom, that's what it looks like. Yeah, and that's canon now.
That's canon. That's what his belt looks like. So now if I said, well, that's a nice looking gold belt loop, well, give me that, you know, and he was saying, I don't know, it's not real gold, or that's good luck, you know, pry it from my cold dead hands, or I'm going to take it from, you know, I'll cut your head off, whatever. So it's one of those things that you get to build a character that is completely unique and completely you get to put your own real world stuff into it. And then you get to roll for attributes. You know, or, you know, choose whatever. There's what is it? Six key attributes. All right.
Yes.
Those determine certain things. Your strength score, obviously, that has to do with strength-based weapons, like how good you can wield those. It has to do with certain things like getting out of grappling attacks, or whatever. Each of these attributes also have like sub-attributes that are based on, like, how well can I investigate something? How well can I perceive something? How good is my athletics? How good is my acrobatics? Can I swing from place to place? Can I lift heavy things? That kind of, you know, that all plays.
How good am I at arm wrestling?
How good am I, which is what Tartarus loves to do. Your Minotaur,
I love to arm wrestle.
Yeah, the amount of times, and that's the thing here. You know, here's a little thing for you guys who've never played Dungeons and Dragons. I, as a GM, have enjoyed and have had to make up on the spot so many things, because Josh's character, Tartarus, this big Minotaur who's a little dumb, or more than a little dumb, right?
Yes.
He likes to get drunk at taverns, and he likes to arm wrestle these random people. And we've spent hours
probably
over multiple sessions doing that, you know, and it's also a character flaw. You know, it's one of those things where sometimes, you know, and you have a thing going in the background where you do it until you get angry and then you storm off, but you have stuff in your background that you're getting upset so easily.
Yep.
And you're really embodying that character, and he just wants to arm wrestle everybody or do whatever. But you have a reason why. You know, you have a reason why you don't want to feel anything. You want to get drunk, and
he may have had some kind of trauma in his past, you know, that he wants to drown it out, and that's his favorite pastime way to do that.
Exactly. You know, and so that it's so much fun, like, you know, that kind of thing where, and I, you know, for the strength score, right, I make Josh roll, and based on his strength score, he gets a little bump to whatever the number is that he rolled. Right.
So if I were to roll a 20-sided die and I got a 15, then I add on top of that my strength modifier, which would be an extra 4 points. And so that would make my score a 19.
Exactly. And then there's also a thing called proficiency bonus, right? And that's how well the things that you're good at, it's like it's like a slow learn over time, and you gain that as you go through different levels, right?
Yeah.
So right now their proficiency bonus for Josh's and for my players is plus 3. Plus 3. So Josh would actually get, if he was proficient in that ability, like athletics, for example, if he rolled a 20-sided dice and he rolled a 15, his strength modifier, he gets a plus 4, and then he would get a plus 3. So he get plus 7 to that, which would equal 22. And we're not going to get too deep in the woods with this because honestly, we could, and we don't have a visual thing up for you to see.
Right.
And this is one of those things that you just understand that dungeon masters, game masters, whatever you want to call them, they are happy. They are excited to help you and teach you about their world.
And if they're not, then they're not a good game master.
Then you got to break up with them, right? And you got to find a new one. But that's one of those things, just like if I were to try to explain Monopoly rules to you, you just kind of need to do it with somebody.
Yep.
And so we're not going to get too deep in the woods on the different modifiers or the different scores and how they equal out, because this is one of those things, when you play it, it'll make sense and you'll learn it and people will help you the whole time.
Right. For instance, like for me, like I said, it seemed really overwhelming, but once I played like a couple games, it started really clicking and made so much more sense just doing the actions and learning that process.
Yeah, if somebody just sat on a podcast and did like a explanation of Monopoly or life rules, right, the board game, then it would be like, what? Hold on, I'm not interested in this. But understand that it's not that difficult. It's actually really user friendly. And if you're playing on something like Roll20 online, it does all the math for you. You just click the button that he says roll this, and you do it.
It's even easier.
It does the math for you. You can turn on your little dice. The dice will roll on the screen, and there you go. That number pops up, and you don't have to worry about it as much.
It's even making me kind of, like I said, or like you said, our current game, we play on Roll20, but we have plans to do a couple in-person sessions, and I'm kind of like worried a little bit, like, am I going to remember to add this or add that? And like trying to remember the actual mechanics of doing it in person, because it's been a long time since I've played an in-person game. So that'll be I think, an interesting experience when we're all trying to roll in person and add all the modifiers and everything.
I think it'll definitely make the game time a little bit longer.
Could be.
So with that said, what I kind of want to talk to you about, what we're going to talk to you guys today about, is if you're a new player, or maybe even if you're like kind of a middle of the road player, we're just going to be talking about classes and maybe some unique ways to look at classes. I'm going to be talking about each class has subclasses, which are, the fighter, right? The fighter subclass we'll get to he is like the preeminent weapon user. He can pick anything up and use it. And there are subclasses, right, that are more unique for that make the fighter, there's a samurai subclass, which gives you the ability, you start out and you get the ability to be proficient with calligraphy brushes, and you're better at speaking to people. You have, that kind of thing going on. And you're able to give yourself this certain type of strikes and everything. Each subclass is unique to those classes, and it adds a little bit extra flair and might help you with character development as well. So we're going to be going through and talking about classes, a little bit of spells, and a little bit of magic casting. And
some feats that you can take as part of your class that I find very useful.
That's right.
And are good to help in some certain situations.
And we'll explain feats. Feats are, so at certain level points, or when you start out, there are things called feats, and these are like extra little fun things that can be tied into your background, or little things that just make you, for example, if you're a Critical Role listener, right? If you've seen the Legend of Vox Machina, their second campaign, which will be coming to Amazon soon, right? The Mighty Nine, Nein. When you watch that, you'll see that the wizard character, he's able to remember things that have happened in the last 30 days. He can remember anything that happened. He always knows which way is north. Like it's called, what that is that's the keen mind feat.
Yeah, I have that as one of the ones on there. It's super useful.
So that is what a feat is. Usually people get it at level 4. Some humans get it at level 1, right? When you start out, you get a feat to begin with.
And that's one thing I like about, the way you GM2 is at the beginning of campaigns, you can pick a bonus feat.
That's right.
You start out with one no matter what class or race you are.
I always do that. And you know why? It's because I find that it's an extra background thing. It's an extra thing that helps you with your background or your character. And the same reason why I start at level 3. Certain classes get their subclasses at level 1. Some of them get them at level 2, and all of them have them by level 3. And that's the reason why I start at level 3, is because I find it sometimes weird when someone is a certain class and they wind up specializing. You're just a fighter at level 2, and then at level 3, all of a sudden you've taken this samurai subclass without having to go into a whole lot of training or whatever. It doesn't sometimes it doesn't make as much sense. In the old school Dungeons and Dragons, there was these long dungeon crawls. There wasn't as much role playing. It was mostly combat oriented / traps and that kind of thing. And there wasn't like, I'm visiting a town, I'm in Baldur's Gate, I'm in this town, I'm doing whatever, and I need to talk to the shopkeeper, right? But now that's become kind of the gold standard. Most people are playing the game not just to play dungeon hex crawls. They're playing it to go almost Tolkien-esque, go to a different world. We're going to Middle Earth.
They want to be in a fantasy story.
They want to be in a fantasy story. And that includes different places in dark and damp dungeons, or dragon's lairs, or just the plains of hell. It includes all kinds of things. So starting out with the first class, we're going to go A through W. The first class is the Artificer. All right. The Artificer is a unique class. It's fairly recent, and we're only going to do like Wizards of the Coast, the official playbook. There's lots of other people. Like, I've created classes for Josh. Josh and I were talking about what a class to create for his wife for our upcoming campaign.
Yep.
People make
homebrew things.
A lot of homebrew things. People make their own classes. They make their own subclasses. And honestly, if you have a GM who likes that kind of thing, if one of those things doesn't fit you, ask them about it, and maybe they'll help you mold or create their own subclass or class to meet your requirements or whatever you want. So the Artificer, all right, it is their description: masters of invention. Artificers use ingenuity and magic to unlock extraordinary capabilities and objects. They see magic as a complex system waiting to be decoded and then harnessed in their spells and inventions. So the Artificer is like, the preeminent maker. They're not necessarily a smith, but they could be, right? They use their magic. They channel their magic into objects.
Yeah, inventors of sorts.
And if you were going to use firearms in a campaign, they're typically like the firearm class. They are the ones with guns. I don't like running firearms because it takes me out of my fantasy knight type of thing. Right. And I also feel like, there's nothing wrong with it, especially if you're running like a more futuristic campaign in space, or maybe a more like steampunk or something like that. Right.
Outside of, again, the caveat of like maybe like cannons on ships or something.
But even then, for me, when in the world that is there is magic that does significant damage, more than what a firearm would do. Right. I feel like firearms just would never be thought about. Right. If that makes sense. And so the Artificer, their key thing is they get to place their magic into certain things. At second level, first level, you get to spell cast, you get some spells. You don't have as much magic as like a wizard or a sorcerer or something like that per se, but you're able to channel that magic into little things. Like you could take a small item, and if you touch it, a light turns on that emits. You got your own little handmade, light. Or you could record a sound on a piece of object. Maybe you're trying to record somebody nearby or record yourself, and you put it on a pressure plate that goes underneath a mat, right? There's lots of little RPG things you can do with that. Maybe that alerts you to a certain, like, oh, somebody's home. Somebody came here. I know I need to get out. And then you get the ability to create magical items, which is a lot of fun. Who doesn't want to create, a magical item? There's a list that you choose from. There's ones that are in the book. There are certainly, you can harness magic into your weapons, make it more powerful. You can have boots that teleport you or whatever, there's a whole list, and you get to choose those inventions and you get to use those. And as you grow in your leveling as an artificer, you get to create more and create different things.
If you've played, many kind of RPG video games and stuff, a lot of those may have aspects of what would be called enchanting or enchantment and stuff. And it's kind of similar to that you're applying some type of magic onto a physical object of some kind. You're enchanting it with some sort of magical essence.
Yeah, exactly. And so as the artificer, you are unique. Now, a lot of people, when they imagine the artificer, the thought usually goes to steampunk. It usually goes to little circle glasses,
maybe a top hat,
wearing a trench coat or something like that. But it's important to remember, like, if you feel like you're playing a more medieval or Tolkien-esque campaign, obviously somebody that looked like, a 1700s, Victorian era person, if they walked into Gondor, it would just throw it off. It would just throw off the whole thing.
That doesn't seem right.
So some of the subclasses I like, I'm going to talk to you about kind of the builds that I like with them. And this is just, some of them are a little bit unique, and it's just a way to think about it. It's just something that you can do outside of what you've always seen as like an artificer or a fighter or what have you, right? So my favorite subclass that I like for this is the armorer.
Okay.
The armorer is interesting. The armorer is able to channel their magic into a suit of armor, and they're able to take their armor on and off very quickly. And they get two options for their armor. They get one armor set that is like, big, like kind of adds like electricity, like lightning to their gloves, right? Then they're able to punch and do a lot like lightning damage with their attacks. And then the other one is able to shoot lightning at a distance from like a node on your hand.
Right.
And that version is called the Infiltrator version. And that's what I would base my character around, is the Infiltrator version of that armor, because you actually get advantage on stealth, right? So you get to roll advantage, right? Means we roll 2d20, and whatever the highest number is, we take it and that's what you get. So if you roll an 8 and a 19, the 19 is what you get to keep.
Right. That takes the precedence over the lower number.
So I imagine an artificer, an armorer artificer, could be very much like a spy or an agent. When we think about Q from
James Bond,
right? He is an artificer, right?
Oh,
that would be what he is.
You're totally right.
He is. So imagine you have that kind of thing. I imagine a girl, a woman, a half elf or something like that, and she is the life of the party, and she's good charisma, and she can flirt with all the men or women, and she's able to get information out of them, right?
Right.
She's able to do that kind of thing. But then on her wrist, maybe she's got this dragon scale bracelet, and with a flick of the wrist, she's covered in this black dragon scale armor from head to toe. The magic aura coming off of it dampens her steps, and she's able to move around quietly, right? And she's able to use some of the spells that you get with that. As an artificer, you're able to become invisible. You're able to walk on walls with spider walk, right? You have that ability to become, and because you get expertise in certain skills as an artificer, you have the ability, right? Or I don't think they have expertise. Maybe they don't. But you are able to use things like thieves' tools to break into things, and you're able to create those almost out of thin air. And so if you were like to not have them, that ability there, you would have the ability to be a very competent spy and stealthy person who would be able to get around. And where you're not, maybe none of the rogue classes really hit you, right? Which we'll get into later. The quote unquote sneaky boy, this artificer build or something like that, you would fit in at a medieval ball. Yes. But then also with a flick of the wrist, now you're covered head to toe in this dragon scale armor or the scale
ready
armor.
for battle.
Ready for battle, ready to sneak around, ready to be spy, ready to be ninja, whatever you want to do, and go from there. And I think that's like one of the builds that I can't wait to play with at some point. Yeah. And I think is very interesting.
Yeah, I've never had a chance to play an artificer, so because of that too, I haven't really looked too much into them or how they work. They're still definitely one of my more unknown classes to me personally,
and they are the newest class as well. They've come out. I think it came out in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which is one of the newer books out there, and that added that entire class. And so most people have only played it, or they've only seen it played through that. My runner-up class is the Artillerist, and the Artillerist lends itself to being more of a, you get to create.
This was a subclass of the.
This is
Artificer?
A subclass of the Artificer. The Artillerist lends itself. People, with even the cover art, you see your character with like a cannon, right? But the cannons are described as either a flamethrower, right? A force ballista, which shoots out this magical bolt of force, or like this energizing cannon that can like heal your comrades around you, right? At 5th level or 6th level, you also get to turn a wand or a staff into an arcane firearm. So I imagine my character maybe is a high elf, maybe they're a siege engineer who failed during combat or something like that, and they're able to invent certain things, and they're out there and they've become an adventurer, and they're able to harness their cannon. The cannon is very small, right? So I imagine you get to start out when you as an artificer. You get 2 armor choices. One is like the scale armor, right? Which is a good medium armor to start out with. Mm-hmm. I imagine when you create that, the scales changing, maybe rotating in a circle, extending out from the shoulder and becoming like a shoulder cannon, like a predator, right?
Ooh, that's cool.
Right? Or the flamethrower becoming, you see a dragon's mouth form out of scales on your hand, and you're just able to use like Boba Fett, like a flamethrower from there.
Wow.
Or a circle appearing on your chest and this magical aura coming out to heal your friends. So It doesn't have to just be, I've got this big cannon. I'm a that kind of guy. And then I imagine their arcane firearm is not a gun. I imagine it almost like a staff with maybe a dragon's mouth at the end of it, and they're able to channel their magic into it, and they do extra damage from their spells when they shoot out. So almost like in Stargate or something like that, where they use these staff weapons.
Or even in Skyrim, you can have those dragon priest staffs.
Exactly, that shoot out certain different spells. Now you're able to channel that into there, or do all this extra damage every time you hit, and I think that's a really cool play. And the cool thing about the Artillerist is they're kind of like they're not the ultimate blaster, but the fact that you're able to do a cantrip, which is like a level 0 spell that you can do at will that does decent damage or does okay damage, and then you're able to add additional damage to that from your arcane firearm. Plus, you get one of your enchanted items can be an enhanced arcane firearm. Essentially, you can add another +1 to your attack and damage rolls to it. Right, you're able to do that. The force ballista, the force flame, or the flamethrower, and the other thing, the healing cannon, those are all bonus actions. So you can cast a spell, and then do another force ballista at range. And you can put decent damage down range for what is kind of like a non-martial class.
Man, like I said, I haven't looked into much, but now I really want to make an artificer class. Like I said, I hadn't read much, but everything you're talking about sounds super awesome. And I'm already having, ideas pop in my head of characters and things to do. So that sounds really cool.
Yeah, so that is my thought. So those are 2 subclasses I like. There's 2 other ones. There's like a alchemist and a battlesmith, and those are both interesting classes. The battlesmith, you get like this little companion, like this little robot kind of companion. You don't have to go steampunk with it. You can go medieval with it. You watch what was it? The Jason and the Argonauts or whatever. There's like a little clockwork bird in that, like clockwork owl that flies around, and that's Bronze Age. So feel free to like dive into that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So next class. So going in order.
Barbarian.
The Barbarian.
Right, which again, like you mentioned earlier, this is the class that Tartarus, the Minotaur I play in our current game, is.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I have had some experience with Barbarian.
So the description reads as this: for some, their rage springs from a communion with fierce animal spirits. Others draw from a roiling reservoir of anger at a world full of pain. For every barbarian, rage is a power that fuels not just a battle frenzy, but also uncanny reflexes, resilience, and feats of strength.
Right. So with that, the kind of main berserkers, they're the ones that, you know, when stuff goes down and you're in the heat of battle, they're the ones that run in head first to engage the bad guys head on, you know, take the damage, deal out the damage, and just cause some havoc.
Yeah, exactly. So they are very, when you look at like Viking lore or something like that, there is a subclass for the barbarian called the berserker, but the entire class seems very berserker-esque, right? They're able to kind of shake off pain from certain things. They're able to like do these uncanny feats of strength and these crazy wild attacks that just hit through people's defenses. But just like all, you know, like all Vikings were not, you know, raiders. Not all Vikings were, you know, like people out there. There were farmer Vikings. There were Viking itself, quote unquote, is the term for those guys. But there is not everybody is a berserker, right? Not everybody is out there. So not all barbarians, not everybody that lives at the edge of the world, not everybody that does that kind of thing is a barbarian in the D&D world, right? They are specific, you know, martial characters, which means they use a lot of weapons to do damage. They're not magic casters necessarily, and they are able to go hit hard and be the kind of person that leads the fight, taking the damage. Now, one of the misnomers is a lot of times, and Tartarus does this, but I like the way that Tartarus does it. But a lot of times the barbarian is the dumb guy, right? Tartarus, it's funny because you've got the deep voice for him, right? He's the big Minotaur guy, but he also didn't see a lot growing up.
Yeah. Just as a little insight on his background, he spent much of his life stuck, you know, in a labyrinth underneath of a castle serving for a corrupt king. So he missed out on a lot of, I guess, just learning a lot of things about society and how to act and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And, you know, he just had a life of survival.
Yeah. And he didn't go to school. You know, he wasn't in school. He was, you know, subjected to pretty much like a life of servitude and in a dark, damp place. So his intelligence being a little bit lower makes sense, you know? But barbarians don't just have to be a big dumb guy.
Oh, no, not at all.
They can be whoever. And so talking about subclasses, the Berserker subclass is a great one. And I think it's probably one of the more played ones than anything. So I'm going to talk about two other subclasses. One of them I like, Path of Wild Magic, right? And for me, it's almost like you don't get to choose to be a barbarian at this point. You are barbarian by circumstance or happenstance, right? And so I imagine one of the characters I imagine for this would be a Furbolg, right? Furbolgs are these elf-like creatures, but they're big. They're much larger. They're usually over 7 feet tall. Yeah. They typically have kind of a bluish skin with reddish hair. Right now, if you want your character to look different, that's good. You can do that. That's what D&D is about. But generally speaking, the class description, the race description, they are bluish tint, red hair, kind of pointy ears, and they are very large. And I imagine, and they're kind of known as like a peaceful people. They have this innate magic that allows them to talk to flowers and plants and birds and animals and that kind of thing. And so they're more like guardians of the forest than anything else. And they kind of live that more peaceful, wise type life. But I imagine a Furbolg on a ship. Maybe he's a fisherman for a local village. And one day he casts his net out. He pulls up a crystal ball. Maybe he pulls up a staff or something like that. And as he gets on board, this magical energy erupts and strikes him. And slowly he finds that he can't control, like he just becomes angry without reason.
Right.
And he lashes out at these people, and he slowly is ostracized because now he is no longer part of that peaceful community.
Right.
And
Right.
he finds himself on the outside. So this wild magic barbarian, they're able to like harness this energy. And whenever you go into your rage, right, you go into this ability, like, you know, the rage is the specific like barbarian
class feature
where you rage and you are able to withstand the damage and take the hits and do the damage. You also get to what's called a wild surge, right? A wild magic surge where you roll a dice and it determines what happens, right? Whether maybe you're able to teleport up to 30 feet. Yep. Maybe this beam of energy comes from your chest and does damage, that kind of thing. So you don't have to necessarily be dumb. You could be somebody that's actually really, really kind, but you have this magic inside of you that's just always ticking. You never know when you're going to explode. And when you do explode into violence, you know, it's unlike how you are in your personal life, you know? So I like that one quite a bit. You know, they're able to see a lot of magical things, and with like a Furbolg or somebody that has some innate magical abilities already, I find that is like an interesting, you know, it's an interesting play.
Right.
And it and that kind of thought of the magic, the weave, whatever out there, it really hits home for me.
Right. That's definitely one of the more intricate and complex subclasses for the barbarian. You know, you have a lot of different ways to play with that, and like you said, a lot of it's, you know, could depend on a roll of a dice on how your kind of rage manifests itself, as opposed to the sort of opposite, the subclass that I play as Tartarus, the Berserker class. That is just purely about, you know, you take this rage mechanic and you turn it up to 11. You know, that when you do rage, it's like rage plus, so you know you're able to get an extra attack, so you're just, you know, going full bore, you know, into battle. You're able to hurt people more, you know, do more attacks, take more damage, and just kind of disregard any inherent sense of your own health or well-being. You know, you're just there to accomplish the task regardless of any risk involved in it.
And you know what, the Berserker is like one of the kings of battle or queen of battle, right? They are there. They are able to like hold the gate. They're able to hold the path and do significant damage. And they're quote unquote like the tank, but that doesn't mean that they, you know, here's the thing. When we play a barbarian or do something like that, you know, be a good fighter or do whatever, but also think about like, what is this character flaw? Like, or what is this, you know, what is this person really good at? Because you could be a very eloquent person. You know, we see fighters today, we see mixed martial art fighters who are very good speakers or very good, you know, like they're very eloquent when they speak to folks, and they're very intelligent, but they're also absolute savages when it's time for violence. And that's the way the Berserker can be as well. You almost just well up, and you do get this mindless rage where you are in it and you are able to do significant damage, and while taking less damage than your comrades would have. And that's one of the reasons why I like my backup class subclass would be the Path of the Ancestral Guardian, and they're almost shamanistic. They're able to like use like these spirits to like force people to kind of fight you instead of your friends, and even heal other people. So it's almost more of a they still get all the benefits of fighting folks, but they also get the ability to be kind of like a utility for a barbarian as well. And I think that's kind of interesting. You don't see a lot of people play them, and I think most people don't, because, you know, the barbarian is the fun hit people class.
Yeah, oftentimes when they want to play it, they want to do whatever can deal the most damage and be the most crazy.
But I love the idea, and as an ancestral guardian, you even get the ability to cast 2 spells, augury and what's the other one? Let me see here. The augury, and there's one additional spell that you get to cast at like a certain level, and you don't even have to use clairvoyance spell. You can use your it's neat because you get, even the clairvoyance spell, it says you get to use your ancestral spirits in place of the magical thing that other classes would use casting the same spell. And I think those are neat. You get this very shamanistic, maybe you want to play like a lizard folk, or, you know, somebody that has kind of like that primal feel to them, and, or, you know, has a deep, you know, like maybe it could be dwarves, it could be humans, maybe you're like on the edge, and you have that kind of Viking or Native American-esque respect for the elders, and you're able to, like, you're that shaman person. Maybe you're not just this giant berserker guy. Maybe you're somebody that people come to for wisdom, right? Maybe you're somebody that people come to, and maybe you don't give the best advice ever, but you're able to, like, take your ancestors, you're able to summon those spirits, and they help you when it's time for battle.
Right.
And I think that's a cool one, because it just adds a little bit of extra utility that sometimes barbarians aren't really known for.
Right. Yeah, that is one thing that I do, and why I kind of multi-classed in my character that I was playing is going the route of barbarians. Sometimes I guess it can get a little stale sometimes if, like, because there is so much utility to some of the other classes in D&D that sometimes the barbarian, if all you do is I'm big and strong and I can hit things, that's fun and has its place, but after a while, sometimes, you see all your other companions, casting these spells or doing cool kind of battle maneuvers and, switching places with people and this and that. And you're like, well, I guess I'll just hit them again. It can kind of, there's moments where I've had it get stale for me. And so, it's nice to have something like that where it could add a little more flavor to, the way you play the character, more utility.
Yeah, exactly. The barbarian's a good class. It's a good class to multi-class with, right? Where you get to choose, where you get to a certain level and you're like, I want to become X next. You know what? I want to take a level in this, and I want to take a level in sorcerer. I want to take a level in this, and you can start building up, and you can be certain levels. Like, you can be a level 5 barbarian that is a level 7 sorcerer too, right? Once you've reached that level, and I think it does add a lot.
With that, you may even want, just as an example, you could, be a level 5 fighter or monk or anything really, but then, you take enough levels in barbarian and you take 3 levels, enough so you get that rage mechanic to use. So, you may not be a barbarian at heart or in play style, but just on a mechanics thing, being able to pull out that rage mechanic and take half damage could be really useful as a tool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a very good class that sometimes is overlooked for, even rogues. I've seen rogues built with, because a rogue, and we'll get to this later, has a special thing called sneak attack. And if they have advantage on an attack, they get automatic sneak attack damage added onto it. And what do you get as a berserker? Reckless attack, right? Which gives you advantage. So you can be a berserker rogue. You can be like a really frustrated, angry thief or whatever who gets.
I'm making a face right now because I never thought about that pairing.
Yeah.
Of using the reckless attack. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and
you just kind of blew my mind. I don't know why I didn't think of that.
Yeah, so that's interesting. There are these interesting. Some people talk about it being metagaming or whatever, but here's the thing: Dungeons and Dragons game masters, we will figure out a way to kill you or make it more difficult on you because we have that ability to do it. So if you want to have like somebody that does hit hard or does whatever, I'm glad you like it and you should do it. Now, I'm glad Josh is making lots of faces.
I keep still making faces because I'm like got like 5 different character ideas running through my mind for a barbarian rogue or something.
We're both going to be thinking about subclasses and class guides for a while after this podcast. So, what's not a stale character and what sometimes is but it's an interesting character to get into, and sometimes it's a little difficult.
There's a lot of different ways you could play this one.
A lot of different ways. And I'm going to read the class guide. This is for the bard. Whether scholar, scald, or scoundrel, a bard weaves magic through words and music to inspire allies, demoralize foes, manipulate minds, create illusions, and even heal wounds. The bard is a master of song, speech, and the magic they contain. My first character, outside of the trailer Mountain Dew Pizza Hut character, was a bard, and it was a custom subclass that was more Norse-esque. I was a skald. So as a skald in that subclass created by my game master, you won't find it online or anything like that. I was more of an orator. When I got into it, I didn't want to be the guy. I didn't want to try to role play singing songs or doing whatever. And when I read the bard, I realized that most people just say, oh, that's the guy with the lute or the flute or the drums. Yep. And that's how he does everything. And he's got to be a sexually aggressive guy because he's got a high charisma score. But when I think of like actual bards, like in real life, like a lot of times they're like traumatized, troubled people. There's a lot of rock stars, right? We see a lot of musicians, but you also see, the very people that like inspire a lot of fantasy. Somebody like Tolkien would be a bard, right? He weaves these tales, and he's able to use his oration to weave the magic. It's through his force of will as a charismatic caster that the bard is able to do certain things. And
right.
The bard has the ability to be an okay swordsman if they want to be. They have the ability to do some damage in melee attacks, and they also have the ability to they are a full caster, which means they can cast spells all the way to the highest level spells in the game once they reach the class requirement for it.
Right.
And so they are a very interesting class to get into. So if you're like, I don't want to sing and I don't want to try to like seduce everybody, you don't have to be that. You can be a troubled person who's who's able to say poems, right? Who's able to use a poem to inspire your friends.
Or, that you write a poem about some king to convince him to, give you some aid of some kind.
Exactly. You could be the guy, you could be the court poet. You could be the guy who meets with them and convinces people through, or maybe you want to just get some extra gold for the night, and so you do a stand-up comedy routine, or you do a stand-up like storytelling routine where you tell the adventures of your group.
What's the deal with kobolds?
Yes. You guys ever try? Well, I can't even.
Carts and coffee with the bards.
There's a Jerry Seinfeld kobold.
Yeah,
that would be great. So you were somebody that just through your words, you were not necessarily practiced with book or whatever. You still have this kind of sorcerer like magic to you. It's this innate ability to cast spells, but it's through your force of will and through you're able to reach out and touch the cosmos, touch this magical weave that exists, and summon your spells through that. And so they are great spellcasters. And one of the spell subclasses I like for the bard, right? There are a bunch, but one of the ones that I like is the College of Creation, right? The College of Creation is an interesting one. When I think of fantasy, I think a lot of people go to Tolkien. A lot of people go to Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or something like that. And in the Silmarillion, or I probably said that wrong. In the the Silmarils, right? The book, the Tolkien talks about there was essentially this music that this music that was used to create the world type of thing. And there's a character that you don't see in the movies, The Lord of the Rings, but he's in the books. There's a guy, and it's funny that they didn't have him in the movies. It probably would have made the books or the movies a little bit more, it would have made the original trilogy a little bit more Hobbit-esque, and that would be Tom Bombadil.
Oh yeah, Bombadil.
So, he's old, he's ancient. He's pre-existed everything. And I saw an interesting theory that Tom was just like a manifested sentient being made from the original creation music, right? And that's the reason why he always sings in the song. He's always kind of got this sing-song voice, even if he's just talking regularly. And I imagine the College of Creation would be similar to that. You're able to create these motes of potential. You're able to the bard has what's called bardic inspiration dice. And as a bard, you're able to roll certain levels of dice that determine, how much maybe you can give Tartarus inspiration, and he is able to roll a D8 or a D6 to add to his roll on top of any other things that he has. It's you're an extra utility person. But some subclasses use those bardic dice to add damage to weapon attacks, or the creation bard, they're able to add it to an ability check, just searching for something, attack rolls, or saving throws. And they do different things. The attack roll, you actually add additional damage instead. It's thunder damage or whatever, when you're doing that kind of thing. The other thing is kind of cool is you get to create something. So you can just kind of magically create a thing of a certain gold value. You can make a longsword, boom, right in front of you.
Apparated out of nothing.
Yeah. And so I imagine somebody that's able to, maybe they're not a singer, they don't have a lute, they're not Scanlan Shorthalt, from who's just singing every single thing. Maybe he's able to just weave words like an author would and create these things. Maybe he is an author, And he noticed as his force of will was so strong that he noticed he was creating these things that didn't exist until he started talking or until he started writing in his book. And you're also able to create like a construct, so I picture this guy as somebody who has like a dagger in his holster, is sheathed on his side, and he's able to animate it. It becomes a sentient object for a little bit, and it's able to actually fly around and do damage, almost like the whatever that blue dude is from
Guardians of the Galaxy.
From Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, his little whistle dagger that flies out.
Exactly. And so when he gets the animate object spell too, imagine him having like 6 of those and being able to animate all of those and able to send them through the air, as well as his own special one that he's able to use his creating performance on. So it's like a neat class. It's like a probably one that's not been played a lot by people. I'm trying to kind of avoid some of those and kind of give some thoughts to it. And especially since the College of Creation lends itself to oratory. It lends itself to being able to, in the beginning, the gods created this world. You're able to like summon that power through your words.
Right.
So
that's cool. Bard is another one of those that I've never played one. I've seen you playing one, obviously, but I haven't looked into it as much as some of the other classes, so I'm not familiar with some of the subclasses. But that's really cool, being able to just create stuff like that at will.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one, my runner-up, would be the College of Swords, and this is the more melee-esque one. This is probably a good one to get into if you're a new player, right? You can be a bard. You can essentially be like a Ted Nugent or something like that, maybe, where you're a rock star, but you also like weapons, right? And you're also good at wielding them. And so you get a fighting style, which means you get to choose from 2 different fighting styles, which help you with melee fighting.
Yeah.
And you're able to use your bardic inspiration dice to do certain techniques and maneuvers that allow you to do extra damage or knock people down or hit more than one target at a time. And I'll say this specifically, I think that the College of Swords pairs well with somebody like a Battle Master fighter, right? If you're able to maintain it and if you're able to like really use it, there's all these different maneuvers, because there's multiple maneuvers that the College of Swords has. The defensive flourish, where you increase your armor class. The slashing flourish, where you're able to hit multiple things, or the mobile flourish, where you're able to move around. And then you pair that with someone like a Battle Master who has additional techniques they can use and additional dice to add damage to it. You can do it. It just kind of makes you this really moving, weaving fighter who's just an absolute menace in hand-to-hand combat.
You could do a lot of and with that. I feel like you could be very creative in your descriptive things when you talk about how you attacked a certain person, and rolling and dodging and then spinning around and blocking this way, and then jumping and kicking off the wall to slice down at them, and then swapping places with someone else to bait and switch or whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of very descriptive ways you could do that if you like getting creative and descriptive with your actions.
And you get the bonus of having those attacks and the fighter features, as well as having some magic that you can use,
right?
Which makes the class even better. Adding those extra, just using your words.
Oh yeah, that's the point. Like, you get all that stuff, but then on top of it, you can also just use a ton of spells, in whatever magic you want as well, from them being a full caster.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's really handy.
Something like Dissonant Whispers or something like that. I use that Dissonant Whispers is this thing where they hear these whispers in their head, and it does psychic damage. We talked about that in our Hogwarts episode, psychic damage, but you get to do damage to them, and they run away from you. And if they run away from you, you get what's called an opportunity attack, where you can hit them again, as a reaction. So it's like a little extra thing that you get during your thing. And I use that a lot, especially when we had somebody that was surrounded by all of us. I would hit him with that, and if it succeeded, he would run away. And then even if everybody was done with their turns, there'd be like 4 or 5 opportunity attacks on this bad guy. And
right. It was a good combo.
It was a good combo. I think it's only a level 2 spell, so it's something that you could get easily with like a level 4 bard subclass.
Right. Cool.
So going next, we're going. I talked about the gods in the College of Creation, and in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, there technically could be an atheist, but there's not really, because there are gods and they are prevalent, and the magic that they give to certain people, people would know about it. It is a known thing. So whether somebody likes the gods or not is one thing, but the gods do exist. They are there. They are very pantheon-esque. There's not like a monotheistic religion necessarily. There's a thunder god and a fire god and a forge god and all these different things that are very Greek, Roman, Egyptian-esque, and a lot of those gods are actually used in campaign. So the next class is the cleric. They are like the intermediary between regular beings, humans, dragonborn, whatever, and the gods themselves. So their class description reads, clerics are intermediaries between the mortal world and the distant planes of the gods. As varied as the gods they serve, clerics strive to embody the handiwork of their deities. No ordinary priest, a cleric is imbued with divine magic. So everybody thinks, I think one of the misgivings about clerics is everybody thinks they're just a priest. They're your local preacher. They're your local Catholic priest or whatever. They are like borderline missionary / champion. They wield weapons. Mm-hmm. They have armor proficiencies. They are able to do damage with their spells.
They're Constantine.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think about, I know you're not as versed with like Game of Thrones, right? But
yeah.
There is a character in Game of Thrones who's Thoros of Myr. And Thoros of Myr, all we ever do is see him sword fight. He's like this drunken guy who's like, he was a red priest of Shai, and he came to the kingdoms of Westeros to be like a missionary for them, and he failed. And so instead, what he liked doing? Drinking and fighting, and that's what he did. He was just kind of like this court person that hung around. He didn't really believe anything, but eventually he was able to use the magic from that god to like actually do things, and it kind of lended him to like believe in more stuff. It gave him some belief. It wasn't until he was actually tested that it became like prevalent that he was able to do these types of things, like return people from, like resurrect people.
Oh.
And so you can be that kind of flawed person and still be a cleric. Clerics are still people. They're not always going to make the right decisions just because their gods say so. And some gods don't make good decisions either. If you're a cleric, you're the war cleric, you probably don't care whether people execute prisoners or not, right?
Right.
He likes war. The war god likes war. That's why he exists, right? He gives people benefits on the battlefield, or he does whatever.
That's his nature.
Exactly. Ares doesn't care whether people die in combat or not, and he would, a war cleric would probably be happy about that. Right. Whereas a life cleric would be like, hey, let's not do that. Let's look at that. But he would also understand, or she would also understand, the nature of life. So my two favorite clerics are the Tempest cleric.
I knew you were going to say that one.
Well,
it's one of the coolest ones.
It is one of the coolest ones. And, I don't know. I think it's just dope. I love lightning damage. I love thunder damage. I love like the Thor idea. I was going to say, Thor-esque.
Resemblance of Thor, kind of things.
Exactly. And you have these cool spells that aren't exactly native to the cleric spell list that you get, like Call Lightning,
that's
or
another
Thunder Wave.
Aside comment is that depending on what class you take, like there in D&D, there's hundreds and hundreds, 500 plus spells that you can choose, but some of them are class specific, so you can only take them if you are a specific class. But there could be certain sub features in some of these subclasses that allow you to have access to spells, like you mentioned, that you don't normally in the class without taking a subclass.
Exactly. Yeah. So those spell lists are really neat to have. Like when you get something that doesn't give you things from the cleric spell list and it comes straight from, like the Call Lightning spell is from, I think it's a druid. It's a druid spell, right? You get that as a cleric. It's like an extra thing you get on top of all of the cleric spells that you get.
And it's an awesome spell too.
It is. So there's so many cool things. So like the Tempest cleric, at one with the storms, they have this kind of like, if you really play into it, all these spells, you can RP things so well, whether it's a fog cloud, whether it's you using like your thaumaturgy or something like that in a lightning or tempest like way. You get to add damage to your weapon strikes that does lightning or thunder damage. You
Being
get
able to control water,
move things around. Yeah. Tempest cleric is one of those ones that's just so fun and it's so primal. And I think somebody like Aarakocra, right, would be a cool Tempest cleric. Somebody from like the elemental planes of the wind. Aarakocra are like these anthropomorphic bird people. You know, they're humanoids. They've got arms and legs, but they also have wings, and their heads resemble eagles or falcons or what have you. And I imagine that is like a cool, you know, they don't live a long time per se, on, you know, to the base book, whatever a GM decides matters there. But they also have this, you know, coming from somewhere where they're like they deal with the tempests, they deal with the storms all the time. Maybe you're a sailor, maybe you're a sea elf or a triton or something like that. They would also have an affinity for that kind of thing. And I think those are awesome. I think that's just such a fun, like, you know, who wouldn't love to have the abilities of Thor, you know, especially as a cleric, you know, your guiding bolt, maybe your guiding bolt looks like the lightning bolt from Zeus,
right?
You know, you've got that going.
That could be really fun to play with, and just having that kind of symbolism behind that is really cool.
Yeah, we saw I was talking to Josh about the Marvel superheroes, and somebody had created classes, like had created these character sheets based on different Marvel superheroes, and one of them was Thor, and he was like an Azamar, which is like a kind of like a fallen, like an angel adjacent, you know, race, and was a Tempest cleric, and it just made sense. You know, he's got his war hammer, and he's able to fly and do all these different things. So really neat. My next favorite one, and this is one where I was talking about before, is like the Forge cleric.
Right. I remember you talking to me. We had a discussion about that a while back, where you were telling me about one of your ideas with the Forge cleric. Yeah,
so like the Forge cleric, you know, the god of the Forge, they obviously have an affinity towards fire. They're able to like withstand fire damage. They're able to take the heat of the smithing, you know, of the smithy. They can stand in the blacksmith. They're able to do all that. They're able to create objects using magic. They're able to create objects. They can channel their divinity, right? Which is like the cleric. All clerics have that ability to channel their god to increase or do a specific like thing with their magical powers that comes from the gods themselves, outside of their actual magical casting. And like the Forge cleric is interesting because you get to create objects like the College of Creation. You create things as long as you have a certain gold value of like, you know, if you have steel and wood and leather, you can create a short sword out of thin air, you know, in an hour. Just without having to work it, you can create a sharp short sword. You also get the ability to make one of your objects every single day magical, whether it's armor or a weapon. So having that early on, which Forge clerics get their abilities at level 1. They get their subclass at level 1. So if you're playing a level 1 campaign and you're playing something where there are scary monsters who magical weapons hurt, but other weapons don't really hurt, the Forge cleric can do that pretty early on. They can
That's a good point.
They can get their magical weapon or the magical armor that does an extra 1 AC, so it's harder to get hit, or 1 extra damage and 1 extra attack roll, you know, 1 tier attack roll that gives you more chance to hit somebody. And if it does, it cuts through that damage resistance that they would normally have to a regular weapon.
That's super utilitarian there, being able to do that. I wonder if, like, are you able to apply that blessing to someone else's armor or weapon?
It says, I'm pretty sure it just says an item you touch, right?
And let's see.
You can touch
one non-magical item that is. Oh yeah, so
you can be a utility person.
As a utility person, you know, you've got a barbarian that you know they're going to go rushing in front line. You touch their armor or their weapon and give it that bonus.
Yep, you imbue it with that for the entire day, and it's a really powerful, because a lot of spells only do that for a certain amount of time, where they make it a magical weapon or whatever.
I was just thinking, I guess you don't often see many D&D parties where you have 2 characters playing the exact same class and subclass, but I guess in theory, if you had 2 Forged clerics and like a barbarian, you know, one person touches their armor, the other person touches their weapon, and they're just, you know, super like amped up. And
the barbarian won't have any armor probably, but
yeah, that's true.
Gotcha.
A fighter then.
A fighter is a good example. A fighter's a really good example.
Right.
Yes, you could do that exactly if you wanted to. I think a Forge cleric is also one of those things where you could, when you go to a town, maybe you rent the smithy for a day. The GM gives you abilities to like try to create your own weapons. Like, you know, who doesn't want to have their own sword that they made or whatever? And your GM can have a lot of fun with that too. Like, okay, well, your longsword is actually, when you make it, you didn't do that good a job. It's not as good as slashing, but you actually now does piercing damage instead. You notice that it's like dull.
You know that, here soon you might run into some werewolves. So you rent the forge for a day and imbue some of your weapons with silver.
Exactly.
That could be super useful in a situation.
Or a grill with silver. That's a callback, isn't it?
Build yourself a silver grill. There we go.
Build yourself a silver grill and you can get full damage on that.
Go listen to episode 1.
From that. So RP, right? Role playing, having a cleric who's like, maybe you just go to forges when you get there. Maybe you come to a town and you go in there and you take some of your holy water and you bless the blacksmith with it or something like that. Or maybe the blacksmith doesn't want any part of that and you try to missionary to him. You try to convert him or whatever. You talk about the things that you can do and show them what you can. One of my ideas is we talked about people being raised by other races. I have this idea for a Goliath, right? Who's this big, huge, hulking guy who's also like 7 feet tall. I imagine him being raised by a dwarf who is a forge cleric, and he himself becomes a forge cleric before being kind of kicked out, like realizing that people just want to use him for his size, and he becomes a certain type of fighter after that.
Right.
And, the idea of this huge 7 foot tall guy, not really associating himself as a Goliath, but really considering himself a dwarf and taking the background where he's like, he takes the artisan background where he's got that going for him. He speaks in Dwarvish and he doesn't have a helmet. Maybe his helmet has like a beard, but then he takes it off and he doesn't have a beard himself. I think that's a fun, like,
that could be fun.
That could be a fun one. But yeah, the clerics, very neat. There's lots of like really interesting examples of them out there. And, they don't always have to be perfect. They don't always have to be the healer either. You can heal things. People made fun of from episode or from season 2 of Critical Role, Jester. She played an arcane trickster or whatever. She played, her god was like a trickster god, like a Loki or something to that effect, right? And she wasn't always taking healing spells. Like that wasn't her bread and butter. She would do it occasionally, but she took a lot of other fun utility spells where she really played into her character.
Yeah.
So we at Geek ETC really want you to play what you want to play and whatever's fun for you. And I think that if you don't want to be a cleric, if you don't want to be relegated to like sitting in the back lines, heal you with my magic, do what you want to do. If you want to be the Tempest cleric and you want to run to the front and use a thunder wave or call lightning down and spin your hammer around and do that kind of thing, do that. You can also be scary. Right.
And then let someone else worry about healing. Have a second cleric in the party like I was talking about.
Yeah, well, they wound up doing that, and one of them was more of a healer. He took more of a healing class, like healing subclass, and yeah, it definitely changed that.
That's true.
That leads us into the next class, the druid, right? And just like the druids, when we think of druids, if you're not familiar with D&D, you often get that Celtic kind of shaman type thing. They were this class of people, this kind of like religious caste in certain Celtic religions and peoples, but in the D&D world, they're kind of like they commune with nature. They have the inherent ability to like understand things, and you're going to find them in the woods more than likely. And so the class description for that says, whether calling on the elemental forces of nature or emulating the creatures of the animal world, druids are an embodiment of nature's resilience, cunning, and fury. They claim no mastery over nature, but see themselves as extensions of nature's indomitable will. I like druids. I think druids are very neat. One of my first ideas for a character that I didn't wind up going with was a druid, like a circle of the land, which I'll get to here in a bit. I think they're really neat. They are also full casters. They have the ability to cast the most powerful spells if they reach the certain class requirement for it, the level requirement, and they are powerful. They have a lot of utility. They can transform into animals at level 2. They have really powerful spells. Nature itself bends to their will, controlling water, controlling air, calling down fire, making, acid coming out of your growing claws, becoming a primal creature and attacking, and acid coming from your teeth. They are very neat, imbuing your staff with magical energy and doing more damage on your wood staff. They're just one of those classes that they always get played that way. They always get played in a certain way, but druids can be from all over. Druids can be, you could be like the keeper of like a religious forest, but also still live in the city.
But you could also not even, be a forest thing. You could be a druid from the Rocky Mountains in a volcanic area or something.
Which gets me to my first favorite subclass, which is the Circle of the Land. The Circle of the Land druids are interesting to me because they can transform into animals like all druids can, right? But they are the most powerful spell users. And the druidic spells are very powerful. And one of the things that kind of halts, like that can be a hang up, and we see it sometimes in like one of our games, where magical users are sometimes afraid to use their leveled spells because you only get so many per day, right? The Circle of the Land druid can actually recover magical energy, just like a wizard can. They can sit down and recover a certain amount of spell slots so they can expand, like they can use more spells in a day than a regular magic caster could.
Okay.
And I think that's super interesting. And they also get spells that aren't available to their class normally, right? So you choose whether you want to be, maybe you're from the Arctic, maybe you're from the coast or a mountain. If you're a mountain druid, you get access to like a really powerful spell, Lightning Bolt, right? Which does damage, I think it's 120 feet, and it's a bolt of lightning that does a ton of damage, similar to a fireball. It is a ton of damage. It can hit multiple characters.
Yeah, that's an awesome benefit, being able to it goes in a straight line, and if there's a bunch of people in a line like that, they can just all get hit by it.
Exactly. Yeah, they're all going to take damage from it, even if they do even if they save, they'll still take half damage from it. And I like that you really manifest this magical energy. I think the animal part is really neat of druids, but I think it's more of a utility thing. Certain, like the subclass, the Circle of the Moon, they get to be turned into more powerful animals. But I think the utility of like a druid where they're able to turn into an animal for a short period of time is pretty interesting. And others, like there's spells out there that do almost as good a job, like polymorph. You get access to polymorph as a druid, but other classes can also turn into animals using that spell. So it's not the most unique thing in the world, but it is interesting.
Right.
So I like that one just because they're these preeminent like druids. They are the Radagast the Brown, right? That's
a good comparison.
They have this ability to really harness this extremely powerful magic and use it for utility purposes, for attacking people, or just for the good of others. You can also heal people. You can create food and water if you're a desert one, right? You can feed people. You can help your party get across somewhere that they weren't. And you're also better at moving across like rough terrain. You are at one with nature, and I like the Circle of the Land for that reason.
That's really cool. Having, again, the utility of that and having access to all that extra stuff, because spells in D&D, again, can add so much. And spells, even if they have a kind of dedicated purpose on what they're supposed to do, you can get as creative as you want with certain spells, and there's a lot of creativity and utilityness that comes with some of those spells, such as something like Spider Climb, being able to navigate certain ways. You can use that to sneak into a second-story house or a third-story house, whereas you couldn't normally before, or go up a side of a cliff or something.
Yeah, I think Spider Climb, you could even give it to a friend, right? I think it's just a creature you touch. So, your rogue or your whatever, maybe your rogue is like, I can't climb 30 stories. Well, now you can, buddy. You can walk straight up on walls. You can go straight up Tobey Maguire and just go up that. I love the spell casting that you get from druids. I think they're really interesting. There's certain spells like Fire Sword or, other things. It's just like this neat visual, these guys who are cloaked in nature and out there, and they're ready to wield elements to their will. And my next subclass that I like for that, right? And there's multiple subclasses for the druid, is the Circle of Spores. And the reason why I love that one is because of your wife. Your wife plays a Circle of Spores druid, a little frog with a mushroom on its head, with a little country voice accent to it. And I like the role playing I get from it. I like the role playing that she does with it. And I also think it's just an interesting class. You get some interesting spells with it. Things like the cantrip Chill Touch. That's a good range spell that does necrotic damage.
Yep.
You get blindness, deafness. You get animate dead, and it is really this like kind of borderline necromancer. And you know, we've been watching The Last of Us. You kind of get that whole like animate zombie thing from it.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
you
that's
know,
a good point.
you get this mushroom kind of like animate the dead, but you can do it in a good way. You know, you're not necessarily trying to kill everybody in Austin, Texas or whatever.
Right.
You know, you get like the mushroom. You get to raise dead in front of you. You get to raise people around you. You get to create like these symbiotic entities that can help you with things you can also heal. You can do a lot of healing with it. You can damage people just as a reaction. If they get within a certain amount of feet from you, you can do damage with just these spores, these imperceivable spores that surround you at all times.
Yeah, she's put a lot of good utility playing that class in the game that we play for sure. And come up with things that I don't know that I would have thought of.
Yeah, I when I saw the Circle of Spores, I wasn't like, it's interesting. You know, maybe I'd want to play a Circle of the Moon or something like that. But now that I've seen her play it in the way that she does, I really like the way that the Circle of Spores plays out, and I think that it's just animating dead. You know, in some of the things that she wants to do, you know, it's like a reaction. If somebody dies within so many feet of her, she can just raise that person to and now they're her thrall.
Yeah, and now we've got a companion that can help us fight people. They may not be very strong or have a lot of health, but you know, it may sometimes take just one extra hit to drop a bad guy.
Or just a meat shield where they use up one of their attacks on them, you know, or even at a distance. You know, it's one of those things where when she did that for the first time, I was like, oh, I did. You haven't done this in a while, or you've not done it at all, and this is fun that you did that. You know, like, hey, I wasn't even expecting it. That's one of the things I'm sometimes bad about as a GM. I forget what my characters can do, but it's also a good thing because they do these things. I design some things and they can just circumvent them.
Yep.
And just like real life, you know, not everything's built for you at like a certain challenge rating, you know, like, you know, not everything is stairs, you know, like, you know, if it's not trying to make us stronger all the time, there are some flat places to walk. There are escalators, right?
Right.
And, you know, sometimes I'm like, oh, I totally forgot you could do that. You know, now you have like, maybe I wanted the character to fall into the ocean with his weapon, that magical weapon I wanted you to recover. And you can just be like, no, they're alive. They didn't fall down. I used my reaction. He died right in front of me. He is now a zombie under my control, you know?
Yes.
I can make him dive down. I can make him do whatever. You know, I love that. I love the way she's done it. I love the damage that she does. You know, every once in a while, my character will be near her and she'll be like, hey, how close is he? I'm like, 30 feet. And she'll be like, he needs to roll a Constitution save, whether he's going to take necrotic damage or not.
Right. Just from being in the area because of the poisonous spores.
And yeah, I love it. It's a very interesting, especially her little frog folk with the mushroom. It just like
it's very kind of cottagecore. She's really into the kind of cottagecore aesthetic and a lifestyle and stuff. So that really fits that aesthetic and play style. He's a really cool character.
Yeah, I love it. Our next class is the fighter. And some people think it's a boring class, whatever. It is also probably one of the easiest classes to play as a new person because you are just kind of worried about hitting people. But the subclasses add a ton of flavor to it.
Right. Yeah. If you want to, with the subclasses that it has in there, you can, like you said, it can be played very simply. But with something like the Battle Master, you can make it very complex. If you're an experienced seasoned D&D player, you know, you can add a lot of complexity and a lot of different skills to it.
Yeah. The fighter subclass or the fighter class reads, fighters share an unparalleled mastery with weapons and armor, and through a knowledge of all skills in combat, they are well acquainted with death, meeting it out and staring it defiantly in the face. So they are like they can be like your knight in shining armor, or they can be kind of your bad guy or whatever. They are somebody like a city watchman or a soldier, you know, is a typical background for them. They are like your person who's skilled with weapons, maybe definitely better than the average person because you're a hero. Sure. And you're able to do really cool things with those. One of my favorite subclasses for them is the Psi Fighter, right?
Right, that's right.
And we have a character that plays that in our campaign. And the Psi Fighter does a lot. It essentially kind of turns you into a Jedi. You're able to use telekinesis. There's a spell that you learn where you're able to like detect thoughts. You can do these long jumps like a force leap, and even protect people with kind of like, you can use a dice to protect, you can use a dice roll to protect, subtract damage that somebody might take.
Right, a protective field. Yeah.
Exactly. I love that. I think it's a really neat subclass. And, you know, being more than just like, I'm going to hit you 5 times, which you can do as a fighter. You know, you can hit 1,000,000 times, especially if you take what's called an action surge, where you get to do like twice as much stuff.
Essentially, yeah, you take your turn and you decide to action surge, and it resets your turn basically. So you can take a whole other turn.
And that's what I love about it. It just, the like, you can do so much. You can do like this tortured mind, like 11 from Stranger Things, or you can be this kind of like Jedi character who learned to like really harness their mind. And, you know, maybe there was some type of psionic energy or something that you were subjected to as a child, and now you're able to actually use this stuff for good and to help your friends out. You get a little bit of utility being able to protect your friends, or leap long distances. Maybe you can be a little bit of a scout or whatever. And I think it really makes the fighter kind of like a fun thing. Plus you get access to a few spells, which is also fun.
Right. If you take a specific subclass, you can get some spells in there as well.
The next subclass that I like is the Rune Knight, right?
Okay.
Everybody loves the Eldritch Knight. You know, that's like a really kind of Gish character where you got like the knight, you got weapons and magic kind of combined.
Your battle mage of sorts.
Yeah, sort of kind. You know, and your weapon can come to you and everything. I think the Rune Knight's kind of cool, and this is what I talked about my Forge Cleric earlier. This is what I would make my Goliath multi-class with. It would be a Rune Knight, because I can just imagine this Goliath, and he's trying to explain to people that he's really a dwarf, you know. And he knows he's not a dwarf, but he's like
in stature and physicality, but at his heart,
you know, that's who he grew up with. And I imagine him saying, "I am a dwarf," and then growing to be
and I dig you a hole
and growing to be 15 feet tall, utilizing his Rune Knight magic. And that's what the Rune Knight's all about. The Rune Knight utilizes the magic of the giants, right? The rune carver things. Right. And I imagine if his father was somebody that's trained the giants and was also a smith and utilized that magic going forward, that this Rune Knight, Goliath Rune Knight, would be able to become this. He's able to get large. He's able to become bigger and take up more space and carry more things. And he's able to do way more damage now that he's twice as big. Essentially doubles your height. It actually makes your height more, because if you're actually a small character like a gnome, for example, and you're 3 feet tall, you automatically become large sized. Wow. So you would be like 12 to 15 feet tall, 12 to 20 feet tall almost, and be way bigger. And so you could get a comedic effect out of that. Like if you were a gnome and you were 3 feet tall, you'd be able to run through a hole, you know, imagine running through like a hole that you could only fit through. And then on the other side, they come around, the guards do, and there's this giant 20-foot tall gnome.
You're some kind of tiny character, and, you know, a bad guy grapples you and they're holding you, you know, and are going to whisk you away. You know, you're just a tiny rabbit folk or something. And then, you know, you're like, oh yeah. And then you engage your giant's might and you grow, you know, to 20-foot size, and, you know, they can't hold on to you anymore. Exactly. Yeah. They can't hold on to you at all. And so you get that ability, and you can even get bigger as you go along. As you gain levels in this class, I think you could grow to size, huge, or what? Really? Yeah. I think you grow to size huge. Yeah, it's 18th level. 18th level. So if you were like a level 2 Forge Cleric and you reached 18th level as a Rune Knight, you would become huge. So you could go to being like 30 feet tall, and now you're doing even more damage. And it is very comedic. How did I not ever see this? I totally want to make a character like that is of small size or something, and be able to grow to 30 feet. Honey, I Grew the Kids, you know? I guess it's essentially like Ant-Man. Similar to it, yeah. But this magic, it comes from these like runes, these things that you learn from the giants. And there's different types of giants in the Dungeons and Dragons world. Cloud giants, or, you know, stone giants. And the different types of runes that you're able to put on your equipment do certain things. Like you maybe you can see better in the dark, or maybe you can do you can cause fiery shackles to come up and wrap around your enemies and do fire damage to them.
So those are like fun. You get a little bit of magical, ability here and there, and you also get the ability to do more damage. You get more role play out of it. The ability to just get big. If you were a barbarian,
get swole, son.
If you were mixed like a little tiny barbarian, you imagine raging and then using another bonus action later on to become giant as well. Very interesting. So I love it. I love that subclass. I think it's really cool. There are a lot of really cool subclasses for fighter. There are cool subclasses that are like designed by the Critical Role team, like the Echo Knight, which is like super power. Like, I think they're super overpowered, but I like them. Just being able to teleport around the battlefield and do damage. But yeah, the fighter, fun, really easy for people to get into because you're not worried about the magical system, and you're able to do a lot of interesting things, and you can role play really well with it if you want to.
That's crazy. Wanting to make another character, that uses that stuff.
So another cool martial class, right, is the monk.
Yes, I have played a monk class in one of our other campaigns. That is my primary class is a monk, and I really enjoy that, and especially with both with this kind of fascination in martial arts, but being able to play that kind of character in this, you can have a peaceful aspect to them, coming from a monastery and very tranquil and a Zen attitude. But if you get and be kind of anti-violence, but if you are forced into a place where you must defend yourself or others, then you can whoop up on some people and pull out the the kung fu and the Bruce Lee aspects.
So monks are united in their ability to magically harness the energy that flows in their bodies. Whether channeled as a striking display of combat prowess or a subtler focus of defensibility and speed, this energy infuses all that a monk does. And that's the key points, which is the specific thing that you get from being a monk. You get this kind of like level of like this pool of energy that you're able to utilize at different levels. And the number increases as you gain class levels as a monk. And you're able to do really cool maneuvers, like add extra strikes to it, or
now you can spend a key point and you have your main attack that you deal during your turn, but then if you spend a key point you can
take two additional unarmed attacks, right, with the flurry of blows move.
So you can spend a key point and you get the flurry of blows maneuver where you can use your bonus action to do 2 more strikes. So you can get 3 attacks in a turn by spending a key point, which is super helpful. And I've used that many times in our campaign to be able to deal a lot of damage.
Yeah, especially if you've missed like your first, like if you got 2 attacks and you miss those as your action.
Yeah, that's really disappointing when you use your attacks and you don't even, you completely miss and whiff it and you don't get to do anything. Well, in an emergency, I can spend a key point and I get 2 more just in case.
Exactly. Now you're throwing 4 hands maybe, and that's the other thing is you get your hands, your unarmed weapons, your hands, your elbows, your knees, your feet, they do more damage than a regular person would.
Yes.
And that also makes them neat. But I think the monk is interesting as well because what you said is what I think most people look to the monk for, and that's the way you play your character. And it is that very like even you see it in the character art, or like Wizards of the Coast put us in there. You see like the very stereotypical Shaolin monk style thing. And if that's not your thing, then hear me out. Your monastery can be anything. It's just like the college. You don't have to go to the college of creation, right? That's just what the subclass is called. So for me, the monk, I am not as like in tune with like the Shaolin stuff as you are in real world. So
right.
It interests me, but like I don't think I would RP that as well as you do. You do a really good role playing that. I see the monastery as being wherever you harness your fighting ability. So one of the classes I like is the Kensei monk. The Kensei monk is a character that they make their weapons more powerful, using that chi energy that flows through them. I imagine that if you went to a gladiator school, that's your monastery, right? Imagine that you were kept as a slave. That's your background, and you learn to fight with a trident and a net, or maybe a sling, right? Now you can use some of these weapons that aren't as popular as other weapons.
Something like a bow staff or nunchucks that you'd typically see.
Yeah, you could use
like
you could use a sling, or you could use something else, and you will do additional damage now that you're a monk, and it uses that like your same attack damage that your hands and your feet and your elbows do. Right. So you could use something like just a dagger or a trident, that only does, the trident's kind of like disappointing, or the spear is, because it only does like a D6 of damage even with both hands. Right. And now you can add now you can go all the way up to a D10 or a sling. Imagine doing a stunning strike, right? With a sling. Right. You throw it around and you harness that ki energy into your focus, or whatever you want to call your ki. You throw that and hit the guy, stun him. You get that very David versus Goliath thing. Yeah. So the monastery to me can be wherever your monastery, like wherever you train to fight, and there's a discipline to it.
I say in that vein, talking about that, you may not be a Shaolin monk from a mountain monastery, but you're more of a route of a Spartan from the 300 type of thing, a hoplite of some kind.
Yeah. There's the I talked about Game of Thrones earlier. There's a group of people in Game of Thrones that we don't really see. They're in the books in the Song of Ice and Fire series, but we only see one of them in the actual show, and he doesn't even really get to do anything, so it's kind of disappointing. But the Norvoshi priests, they're these they train in these monasteries, but they're not really training with their hands and feet. They're known as like they have these axes, and that's like their thing. You could have this battle axe that's like you have some type of almost holy thing to it, and you're also this like super well trained martial artist specifically with that one weapon. I think Kensei monks would be like a good example of that.
Right. That's pretty cool. I've definitely really enjoyed playing it. My particular one that I play in a campaign is a homebrew subclass that takes a lot of stylistic things from Dragon Ball Z, being able to shoot, big Kamehameha type blasts out of your hands, or eventually even being able to fly, but using that sort of a key energy to empower yourself in similar ways to like Dragon Ball Z stuff, which I thought was pretty cool.
It is awesome. I love the way that you play, the way you role play it. I think I'm playing kind of a little bit more, my bard died in a pretty epic fashion, and now I'm playing another homebrew class in our Sunday games, and it's you have this innocence about you where you don't really understand the world, and I think that's kind of cool. And I was using spells to take away like the taste, like the horrible taste of alcohol. And you were drinking for the first time. You're like, oh, this isn't so bad, because beforehand I would cast a spell on it that took away the taste. It made it just taste like warm apples, or like something sweet,
or wine, or something cider.
So now you think that's what they all taste like, and you were just getting so drunk without any of like the forewarning of the alcohol.
Right. Nothing to stop me from just chug-a-lug right on down everything that was in there.
Exact. Yeah, that's it. Hilarious. That was a fun time. It was like a fun like little RP session, getting you super drunk.
That was cool.
But another subclass, more in the guise of that like typical monastery feel, is something like a ninja, right? Like the Way of the Shadow.
Yes.
So you get this kind of assassin feel. The Way of the Shadow harnesses like the darkness and like the dim light to be able to move at like lightning pace, and then they have certain spells that allow them to be more stealthy, like Pass Without a Trace, or silence, those type of things.
Pass Without a Trace is one of those spells that is, when it comes to utilitiness, I really wish I had it on one of my classes, because if you as a party are trying to sneak in anywhere or everywhere, you have to roll a stealth check. You have to see how quiet you're being, how quiet your steps are, how quiet your conversations are, and if anybody can hear you moving. Pass Without a Trace, adds whatever you end up rolling, it adds an extra 10 on top of it, which for something like a stealth check kind of almost is an automatic succeed.
Yes. And I'm playing, and we'll go over this when we get to Ranger. I'm playing a Ranger bugbear, this big burly guy who's kind of like, but they've also got this kind of sneaky nature to them. They're 7 feet tall, but they're able to fit in small spaces, and they're very lanky and strong and able to like, and my character has a climbing speed from from some of the Ranger stuff that he has, and he has Pass Without a Trace, and he also has expertise in stealth. So he naturally, when he casts Pass Without a Trace on himself, he is getting, and I'm level 9 now, he gets plus 23 automatically. So when I was playing, we were sneaking in this facility recently. We did this scene where the teams broke up, and this is more of a cyberpunk sci-fi campaign that I'm playing in. And the DM, she's awesome. She does a great job. I love playing with her. And she, due to some time constraints in the holidays, we had to split our party up. And this ranger, and I was able to move along and sneak in all these places. He was rolling consistently without like any homebrew stuff. Really, he was rolling in the 40s. Right? He technically couldn't go under like a 20 or a 24 would be the lowest he could possibly roll. Right, which is a pretty good roll for most everything else. And this cat was doing it really well, and he gets another ability at level 11 where he can add another plus 10 to his thing. So I have the ability to vanilla without like crazy homebrew rules, be able to roll in the 50s. And
right, which as far as there's different kind of levels you can set. If you have to complete a task, there's a certain different levels the GM can set that you have to at least pass this number to be able to succeed at it. And as far as kind of rules go in D&D, the highest that can be like an almost impossible task would be you'd have to roll a 30. That's essentially the highest challenge rating to complete, whatever the said task would be. So when you're rolling 50s, like, you're basically completely invisible to anybody trying to see you.
I am. And, I am this bugbear, this 7-foot tall, hairy beast, goblin-esque. I am Bigfoot. That's the reason why you can't get a picture of him. You are blurry. This just in. Yes, I am Bigfoot. Bigfoot is a big bugbear.
Did we just make a? Yeah. Are you just saying that Bigfoot in real life is a bugbear
who's getting a plus? Yeah. Who
has really good stealth? Who
checks? Has a really good stealth score? That's all it is. And
so he could be all around us, and we just wouldn't know.
Pretty much, yeah. Because our perception is not that good. Because I'm not even an adventurer. I'm just a commoner. I've got 4 health points and I can't really do a whole lot. So next time you see that blurry footage and you're like, I don't believe in him. Just know it's a bugbear, and he is just better than you at perceiving him. But the Way of the Shadow, adding all of that to it. Able to be this stealthy ninja-esque. Maybe you get your little short sword, right, which is also one of your monk weapons, and you're able to go in there and you can sneak into places. You can be kind of that silent assassin. You can even teleport from from dark light to dark spots. If you see a place that's like dimly lit, you can magically teleport there. And that's so cool. Just you get that kind of anime feel, like zip, 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 zip. Like, imagine every other 20 feet there's a street light out. And there you are. Boom, boom.
Yeah, boom. Like I said, if you have a bow or a sling, you shoot your sling and knock out these, if there's torches or something, you just, or better yet, you have a wizard in your party and they're just able to snuff out torches or candlelight and somewhere creating a space for you to teleport to.
Yeah.
That could be pretty cool.
That is cool. And that's the reason why we love monks, is because they are that kind of fun. Now, they kind of are, they get underrated a little bit sometimes because they don't have as much health sometimes as some of the other puncher fighter people, the other people with swords and everything like that.
They're a little more squishy.
They're slightly more squishy, but they are harder to hit. And so like the Kensei monk especially, they can be a little bit harder to hit if you can use your weapon as like almost like a shield to kind of deflect things. And if you're that sneaky, you're going to be hard to hit anyways. And I think it's just, if you like it, if you think that, the Shaolin monk kind of things are cool, or if you just want to be a guy that grew up in the school of hard knocks, and you're not as like, Shaolin oriented or karate-esque or whatever, you can find a way to role play that. You could be a like tavern brawler, street fighter, martial artist guy, like you and I both train martial arts. I'm a grappler, you're a striker, and they're two very different schools. Especially when I grew up wrestling, it's a totally different thing than going to a karate class. Very, very different, but just as disciplined. No belts, no gis, but it is one of those things that they are also a martial artist.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
And speaking of discipline, right? The next class is the paladin. Okay.
Right.
And the paladin is one of those that I feel like is oftentimes just really driven in like one direction, very cleric, like God, 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 God,
Right.
God, God. And that's not necessarily the case. So I'm going to read you the paladin, short paladin description.
Okay.
Whether sworn before a god's altar and the witness of a priest, in a sacred glade before nature spirits and fey beings, or in a moment of desperation and grief with the dead as the only witness, a paladin's oath is a powerful bond. So
they have their oath that they're kind of bound to, as opposed to just kind of, I guess, following a deity, worshiping a deity of some kind. Or
that's right. So the paladin is bound to their oath. It's so much so that they put their whole heart and soul into it, and that's the reason why they are also a charismatic caster. They also use charisma as their casting focus.
Right.
Now there are divine things that they can do, right? And so it's on this borderline of like this kind of like, you're very zealous. You're very zealous. So this overwhelming like zeal and push towards that, because some of the classes, like one of the classes is like you're sworn to the crown. That's one of the
yes.
There's Oath of Conquest is one of the subclasses where you're driven to like overcome and conquer and do that kind of thing. And so when they're kind of shoehorned always into like this religious knight who's like holier than thou, you get this kind of like cleric, mindset where they're almost not allowed to do certain things. They seem like they're
limited by what their deity kind of allows them to do or not do, possibly.
And just like we talked about with the cleric, right? Like the war cleric does not care. Like the war cleric works for the war god, right? They are a missionary for the war god. They preach the war god. They are the intermediary. They do things they will fight in battle. They will do these things to further like the war god. The same thing with the cleric, right? If you're the Oath of Conquest,
or the paladin.
If you're Oath of Conquest paladin, right? You are not like, well, maybe we shouldn't take over the village, right? You want to. That's what you are driven to conquer.
You will conquer.
You will
this
conquer.
task.
It's literally the root word, right?
It's interesting. Just in this short description you gave, like I've looked at in the many hours I've spent with character creation ideas and stuff. I've looked at paladin things a number of times. I've yet to play one. And I think I just now realized that I didn't really get it till you just explained it. Like I for some reason I couldn't wrap my head around what they were all about, like what the paladin class really was. But it literally just took a simple explanation that they have an oath, and that doesn't have to be I guess I had in my head similar to a cleric that it was a divine kind of thing. But no, they can have an oath to anything, and that's just their driving force through their life is what their oath is. Yeah.
And they're a lot of their casting, like a lot of their spells are cleric-esque, but they're very much their own thing. The paladin has a very unique magic spell list that they can choose from. Things like Find Steed or like or some of the smites. Those are very unique to the paladin subclass. But and some of those seem like they're very like religious, but they're not necessarily like, it doesn't have to be, is what I'm saying. So the cleric, I would argue you're not going to have an atheist cleric, and you're really not going to have, you can have people that don't like the gods or whatever, but you're not going to have like a ton of like atheistic NPCs necessarily, either. You'll have some that like, I don't like them, or I worship the devil, or I'm a person for, I'm a cultist for this or cultist for that. I'm a vampire, or I'm a lich, or, whatever. But the paladin is way more than just some holier than thou knight in shining armor. They don't have to be. As a matter of fact, my choice for the subclasses, okay, my first one, my favorite one, is the Oath of the Ancients.
Ancients, okay.
Oath of the Ancients. And these are the tenets. So these are kind of like the principles for the Oath of the Ancients. And if you remember, your wife, her original character in our campaign, before I killed her, was an Oath of the Ancients paladin, right?
Oh, right.
That's right. That's what the character was. And so she did have like more religious stuff to it, and it was a very well done. Like she had this like religious affinity to a god who was kind of like a goddess of the hunt / nature.
Right.
And that was fun, but it doesn't have to be. It could be to a fae being. It could be to just you could wander off one day and just be like, bow before trees, almost Game of Thrones style. You could go to the weirwood trees and pray to them and worship them, or not even do that. Just make an oath, like, I'm going to do this. And through your devotion, that's the main thing, the devotion to that oath, you develop your powers.
So could you have an oath that your goal in life, your oath is to steal any apple pies on windowsills in the countryside?
There could absolutely be like an oath of like taking, oath of,
oath of thievery, I guess.
Oath of thievery, yeah. Like, I mean, you could do that. There's, I'm sure there is a homebrew where there's something like that.
You can't keep your mitts off of your grubby little hands off of other people's things.
I mean, in essence, the oath of conquest would be like that, right?
That's a good point.
I mean, it doesn't outright say like, hey, it's skullduggery and like, going and stealing things. But I mean, you want to take things from others. I mean, what's more, sure, there's no apples on windowsills, but if you take all the windowsills by taking a whole town.
Right. I'll just take your house and your neighbor's house and the whole village.
I will conquer the whole county, the whole canton, the whole province, right?
Yes.
So the oath of the ancients, these are their tenets. This is like kind of like their shtick, right? Kindle the light through your acts of mercy, kindness, and forgiveness. Kindle the light of hope in the world, beating back despair. All right. Shelter the light where there is good, beauty, love, and laughter in the world. Stand against the wickedness that would swallow it. Where life flourishes, stand against the forces that would render it barren. Delight in song and laughter and beauty and art. If you allow the light to die in your own heart, you can't preserve it in the world. And then be the light. Be a glorious beacon for all who live in despair. Let the light of your joy, courage shine forth in all your deeds. So they get access. They're very Green Knight, right? They're very, they've got their armor and maybe vines, and they've got their antlers maybe on their helmet or something like that. Or, it doesn't have to be a forest. It can be, there's not everything's like a perfect, deciduous forest or something like that.
Right.
You could be Oath of the Ancients for the desert. You could be
for the mountains. For
the
tundra. Yeah, lots of different stuff.
Absolutely. And one of their key abilities, so the paladins don't get a ton of subclass things. They get some special spells, right? They get, like the ensnaring strike spell. They get moonbeam, misty step, things that aren't accessible from their spell list that they automatically get just by taking that subclass at different levels. But they also have the ability, and one of my favorite things is the aura of warding they get at 7th level. And they have a aura around them that surrounds them at all times.
Yeah.
In 10 feet, right? Any creature, including yourself, within 10 feet has resistance to damage from spells.
Ooh.
That is huge.
That is very huge.
At higher level gameplay. That is a huge, metagaming aside, just having the ability to kind of like shake it off and be able to role play about that is awesome.
That if you've got more squishy people, some wizards or things that you kind of, stay within this boundary of your paladin. And even the first thing that popped in my head was pairing this with somebody who has a sentinel feat.
Oh yeah.
That you got a couple, your two hard hitters, a paladin and, a barbarian with sentinel or something. And then they go in and, especially if you're fighting somebody with spells, that could really parry off each other and be pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much you could do with it. That some of the different paladins have this aura around them that they get at 7th level. Others have other features.
Oh, so and that the range increases from 10 feet to 30 feet when you're 18th level. That's pretty high.
That's pretty high,
but still, within 30 feet, that's awesome.
That's huge. So if you're playing like a level 21 shot, or you're into like high level gameplay, and you decide, a lot of people multi-class the paladin, and I like multi-classing because I feel like I get to get some really interesting player characters.
Right.
But there is something said for the power of like a straight up level 20
really,
single class.
Yeah, any single class, like if you can get it up there 18 to 20, those last 3 levels in pretty much any class, like they add some pretty beefy stuff on top of what you already have. And
you're already a demigod at that point anyways.
Right.
But when essentially if you're just 2 level, like you're level 10 of something else and you're level 10 of something else, you have the hit points, you have some of the cool things, but you're really missing those later things. And I think some DMs struggle with like being able to fight somebody that's that high level. I don't,
Right.
because
You just got to be creative.
You just got to be creative. You just got, come up with your own creatures, come up with your own little things, mix and match, legendary resistances or whatever.
Right.
Make it fun. Like I said, I will always say Dungeons and Dragons for me as a dungeon master, my primary thing is for my players to have fun and make them feel cool.
Right.
Right.
And in that case, like, if, the creatures in the thing don't, aren't powerful enough or don't match up, like just the thing I thought of right now, you could take any creature and just put a label in front of it, like, oh, you have a kobold or some kind of a giant bat, and just add like elder in front of it.
Yeah.
Oh, now it's an elder giant bat.
Kobold lich, right?
Yeah, yeah, You can add a suffix or prefix to it, and then you can just set your own stats.
Yeah, we harp on like player characters being able to get the character they want, right? We want them to have the character that feels really good and is really unique. Dungeon masters need to feel the same thing
for sure,
for their bad guys. I make a ton for our campaign.
Yeah.
I make a ton of unique characters.
I've loved some of the ones you came up with.
And world resistance. We have a character, and this is I'm going to touch on the second subclass in 1 second, but we have a character that you guys have adopted, right? A kind of simpleton half orc or orc, I forget what he is, and he's got a head injury, and I've not really used some of his abilities yet, but one of his abilities was just like, I call it diminished intellect, and if somebody makes a wisdom saving throw or tries to charm him or do anything that affects his mind, he's able to just punch him, because he's not the smartest guy,
right?
But he's fun.
You have to have some intellect to control, in a sense.
and there are a lot of spells that work like that, where if your intelligence is too low,
is below. Yeah, if you try to use it on a creature that has to have an intelligence of at least 2 or 4 or something, otherwise it does nothing.
Yeah, so
right.
Those are fun. Like I like coming up with those things, and I will say this as a dungeon master, if you play in person, I don't understand, like, it can be harder because you're doing it all on paper, but for those who are doing it like TT, like on a virtual tabletop,
right,
way easier, easier to do.
Agreed. So
second subclass is just more of like a also utilitarian kind of helping out. The Oath of the
Support
Ancients
class?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, the Oath of the Paladins have a lot of stuff that they can do. They're not just tanks. They're not just.
They're
people.
Very widely used. They can kind of be diverse in different, more healing based or more combat based or just utilitarian.
Your wife in particular, with her character, right? She played a satyr, which like a little half goat person from the Feywilds, and she was very healing based,
Yep.
And she probably saved you guys from dying several times.
Oh, for sure.
Because you
couldn't save herself.
She could not. Well, yeah.
That's because she didn't want to.
That's because she didn't want to. She suffers like most of us from. I've got too many characters and not enough playtime.
Exactly.
In her back pocket. But,
yep.
So the next one is the Oath of Glory. Okay. So I like that one a lot, just because it's you're kind of you almost just kind of pump up your comrades. You kind of keep them moving. You have spells like heroism. You have like enhanceability. That's right. Protection from energy.
Right.
Freedom of movement. Those kind of things. It's just kind of thing where like you could be this paladin with maybe you were an athlete as a background, right? And very much maybe you were like a boxer or fighter or something like that, and you swore on your father's dying bed that you were going to become the best athlete out there, and just going out and adventuring, you wind up taking up arms, and
right.
Maybe the world requires you to do that anyways. It was very frequent, if we look at real world, to look at ancient times and medieval armies and the armies of antiquity, for them to be levied troops who are very much untrained.
Yeah.
And so
you never knew when, out of nowhere, your country was suddenly going to be conquered by some opposing force, and they would have to come to the common man and, train them to fight.
Exactly. So the Oath of Glory is a fun one. I'm not going to go through all the 10 snacks. We got into a DM deep dive there, but it's a fun one to look at. It also has an aura that gives your comrades like a lot of speed. So if that thing you talked about, like having a wizard or somebody near you, and maybe you were like the tank guarding the thing, having that ability to like enhance their speed and that kind of thing. Like you could actually help with retreats, not just advancing. It's not all for attacking. You could also help with them getting away from things.
Yeah, definitely. That's super useful. If you're in a some kind of dungeon or something that you complete, kill the bad boss, and you take the treasure off the pedestal at the end, suddenly the entire cave system starts collapsing in on itself, and you've got to get out.
And it's not something he has to cast. It's not something he has to rely on his magic pool for. It's just straight up like, you're within 10 feet of me or 30 feet of me, depending on the level, you can sprint. Like you have you're way faster. And, maybe that's your glory, right? Maybe your comrades make it through and they turn around and the rocks fall and they feel the speed like wane from them and you're left behind. And you're what allowed them to get out. There's something to that.
Wow, yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. There could be a lot of fun with that. The Paladin's a fun class. I think, like I said, it's very Holy Knight, you get the very Templar, like Teutonic, like, it's easy to like real world go like Catholic knightly orders.
Wow. I'll add a Paladin to my list of new characters to make.
Yeah.
I've already got like 3 or 4 of them this conversation so far.
Especially like the Oath of the Ancients, there's so many fun things you could do with that.
You can come up with your, whatever the ancient is, you can come up with your own ancient being, or talk with your DM and, see if they've got a already set, guideline of what, gods are or different deities type of thing.
Yeah. What pantheon, what's the pantheon look like?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. So, moving on from the Paladin, we're going to get into the Ranger, which is one of those classes that's been very much dogged on in 5th edition. People have not liked it as much. They feel like it's not had as much fun with it. But Wizards of the Coast and a lot of people have added these like revised Ranger settings to it that help it gain a little bit more power. And some of the subclasses are a lot of fun, though.
Mm-hmm.
So the Ranger, I will read you that example. Far from the bustle of cities and towns, past the hedges that shelter the most distant farms, from the terrors of the wild, amid the dense packed trees of trackless forests, and across wide and empty plains, Rangers keep their unending watch. I think Rangers are really cool. When we are introduced to Aragorn in Lord of the Rings, right?
Strider.
He's one of them Rangers from up north.
Right.
And so there's already like some sense of like, oh, what is that? Is it an order? Is it just like what he is?
Is it a lone survivor kind of deal? Does that just mean you're completely on your own? You're not affiliated with anything? Are you a mercenary, a hired hand? There's a lot of different mysteriousness aspects to that.
Yeah, for me, the Rangers, they have they're really good fighters. They have a very, very basic magical casting system based on their wisdom stat. So, but it's not super important that they have a high stat in that because there's not a ton of attacks or anything they're doing with their wisdom score. However, you also get a utility, right? You also get a little utility from things like Pass Without a Trace, which is like one of the absolute Ranger spells. But, you have the ability. You're like that archer. You have...
Right. That's the first thing that pops to me when you hear Ranger. To me, that immediately equals archer, first and foremost in my mind.
And that's the thing, that you can play the archer and they are fun. But realistically, they can start out with a long sword. They have decent armor. They have a shield if they want one, and they are they have a D10 hit points just like a fighter does.
Would you say there'd be any aspects to like Geralt?
Geralt, for sure. Matter of fact, when you look at some of the things like the Monster Slayer or whatever.
That's what made me think of that. Yeah, he's got that very, hunting down monsters in the countryside sort of aspect to it. That is a very big aspect of that Ranger.
And that's one of the things. They are the experts. They have foes that they know and they're able to mark and track. And, maybe I think of it like this, right? In my current world that I'm building, the world of Zetnora, right?
Right.
I have included in several of the countries, several of the city-states and countries, I've included specific Ranger organizations. Going back, last week we talked about Harry Potter Hogwarts Legacy, right? And I told you I was like I grew up with the Redwall series. That was like my thing.
Right.
In those books, there was one, and so the Redwall series was about like these anthropomorphic, little animals, badgers, weasels.
Animorphs.
Yeah, and they were like medieval. It was very, it was written by a British guy who kind of Tolkien-esque, like he's just like a humble little guy that lives in the country in the UK, and they had some really cool things. They had some like really cool battles, and I remember there was one that was the something of Salamandastron was the island, and there was a badger that ruled this place, and he was in charge of this company of hares, and they were called the Long Patrol, and they were like these pseudo warriors. They were warriors, but they would go out and they would go out and defend the countrysides and do this kind of thing. They would fight off the raiders. They would help out people. And I always thought that was like such a cool thing. And so I think of like ancient soldiers. There was usually like some type of harassing force. There was usually some type of skirmisher or something to that effect that was really good at being almost like a special forces aspect to it. Like they're able to sneak in, they're all able to fight, but they're also able to get out. But you don't want to leave them in there for long. So I think of Rangers, like if you're going to have Rangers in your world, they should be a small military force, or like almost like a border guard or something to that effect.
Okay.
There's somebody that keeps the watch. They keep the bad things at bay. Maybe they're like a local group who goes out on patrols and then comes back over a series of time.
Right.
And so my first Ranger one that I like, and this is like a really easy one, and it gives me like very like animated ideas, is the Drake Warden.
I haven't looked into this one yet.
Okay, well, this is a fun one. This is actually a really, really cool one. It's from Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, which is one of the newer books that Wizards of the Coast put out there. And obviously, from the name, it's very dragon-centric. And so as a Drake Warden, you get a Drake companion.
Oh,
right?
So you get to have a little dragon buddy that's flying around with you.
Well, first off, they're walking around for a little bit, right? And as they get bigger... So
it's like a baby, and it grows over time with you, kind of?
Sort of, kind of. I mean, I don't think it's like a baby. Like, I don't, like, it does...
A pure hatchling from an egg. The yolk is still fresh upon its skin.
3-day baby Jesus, and he's just fighting for you.
8 pound, 7 ounce little baby Drake.
Little baby Drake. So no, it's a very cool subclass where you essentially get the ability to he becomes your mount, and then he can fly with you. He grows in size as you guys go along, and you can use him as your mount. Like you can be flying around on a dragon, Khaleesi style, Game of Thrones, whatever, or like How to Train Your Dragon. Be using your bow if you want, and he also has a breath weapon attack.
I really have to read some of these subclasses more, because that sounds awesome.
It is so cool. Like you can, I think, you even allow your weapons to do like elemental damage that his breath weapon does, or her breath weapon does, whatever your dragon would be.
Right.
It's super neat. I love it. It's like a very fun thing, and you can almost picture like these people who are like, maybe these young drakes. You can imagine an actual organization that would specialize in this kind of thing, and how you would come across these dragons, and how you would originally meet your dragon or your little drake, and then what happened? Did they all get wiped out, and did you get forced away from did your whole organization get out and you guys were the sole survivors? Were they mistreating the drakes and you took off with yours? There's so many different things you can do with that one, and that's a lot of fun. And who doesn't want to have a drake? Who doesn't want to ride like a little dragon in a battle?
Kidding.
So you're looking at it still. So my next one is the Horizon Walker Conclave, and I like this one. This is a very niche one. This is one that deals primarily with like portals and like protecting the
planar different
the different planes of existence, right? They almost have like this. You can also imagine an organization who is dedicated, like this is the portal to hell. This is the portal to the Feywild. This is the portal to these things, the fire plane.
Yeah.
And it is a rift, and these monsters will come through, and we're the guardians of civilization, right?
Right.
You can imagine that type of thing. So they get really cool abilities where they're able to kind of like, and this is one of those classes you might like too, because it is a very teleport centric one.
Right.
You know, so like they get some extra damage starting at 3rd level when you get the subclass whenever they hit somebody. And then they also have the ability to Misty Step. They can go like ethereal if they want to. And there's one that this is at like level 11. This is why I think you would like. You gain the ability to pass between the planes in a blink of an eye. When you use the attack action, you can teleport up to 10 feet before each attack to an unoccupied space you can see. If you attack at least 2 different creatures with the action, you can make 1 additional attack with it against a 3rd creature. So you can you can kind of blink, and you like stab. You
appear and stab and then disappear and appear somewhere else and kick somebody and disappear.
And then do it again, as long as they're all within 10 feet of each other. And that's a really fun one. And then as a bonus action, you could Misty Step back to where you're from or whatever, you know? So it's a really fun one. But one of their main things that they have is called like Detect Planar Portal. And I think this is one of those things, if you are a DM and one of your characters want to play that, really take that into account, you know? Even if it's just little demi-planes, right? If you guys are in a house, maybe you guys are in.
That's one thing that I've really liked too about your games is you know your characters very well and you know kind of their abilities and some of their goals and stuff, and so you'll slip little things into the story and the campaign specific to the characters, and then when that character comes across that specific thing, you know, it's their little kind of gift that you get to unwrap. It's like, oh man, like this is perfect. I get to use this particular ability that I don't often get to use, but I've really wanted to for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I love it because that's the goal, is to make you feel like a hero. And who wants to have like a bunch of abilities that they don't enjoy,
right,
or they don't get to use, right? You know, when you're creating a character, and even if you're not metagaming, right? Metagaming is where you're just like thinking about numbers and trying to do the most damage or whatever. We're very RPG, like we are very role playing oriented in our games, and that's more important than combat. But I love dynamic combat because that's one of the problem solvers, and it's also one of the things that adds some risk to everything. But you know, who doesn't want to have, like, who isn't building their character and saying like, oh, I can't wait till I get to this level. I bet maybe I could like couple these different things together and string them along. I love that.
Oh yeah, me too.
And so as a DM, if you are running somebody that has a Horizon Walker, consider like giving them some demi-planes. Consider like, if you are, even if like Curse of Strahd or something like that, right? Where you're not able to escape Barovia, just outright. Consider like if you're in a house, you know, that there's like a little demi-plane where the guy keeps his treasure, and there's a monster in there.
Yeah,
right?
There's a wardrobe you open up and there's a freaking portal in there to this, you know, demi-plane.
But only the Horizon Walker is able to sense it out because that's his special ability.
Exactly.
So give him the ability, like, you know, everybody else is like looking and then maybe they're not even finding a lot of treasure. And that's really frustrating when you're like, oh, I got this big house. Why can't I find this guy's treasure? You know, why can't I find, because we love looting. Everybody loves looting.
Right.
And so,
but your ranger, he senses something's amiss.
And he doesn't have to roll for it. That's just, he's so cool. Because of him, everybody else gets something,
right?
You know, so because of him, have something really cool for 1 or 2 of your other players in there, where they're all very happy that he chose this subclass and he has the ability to do that. And so Rangers, interesting. You know, I play a Ranger in a more sci-fi oriented campaign, and I have, you know, guns and everything, and I really love it because like I talked about earlier, I'm rolling. Like in the 50s, I have the opportunity to roll into the 50s, possibly,
which is absurd.
Into the future, you know.
Yes, and rolling into the next campaign.
Yeah, literally, you know, like breaking the fourth wall, coming out of the game and then going back in wherever I want.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love it. I think Rangers are cool. I think they're underplayed. I think, you know, just work with your DM around what they can do.
I've got a character that's kind of a multi-class between a rogue and a ranger, an elvish archer.
And he hit hard.
And yeah, I used him in that one shot we played, and you could definitely deal some damage for sure. Yeah,
you one-shotted like one of my, like, you know, it was a level 21 shot, and you one-shotted like one of my, like, level, like my CR 17 or 18,
something like that.
Monster,
with a mix of a few different abilities from both things. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, and that made you feel cool, and I loved it.
Exactly.
I loved that you did that. You know, it's fun to do that. All right, so moving on.
Speaking of rogue.
Speaking of rogues.
Yeah, that's the next class.
And it just snuck up on me too.
Oh
There's
my
one
gosh.
right behind me.
There he is. So rogues are probably my favorite class. And I actually haven't really got to play one for a while, and I'm really jonesing to play a rogue again. So there's a good chance in whatever next campaign is that I'll have some aspect of rogue. because I find them so fun to play.
Yeah, they are really neat. I ran that one shot for you and one of our other players. That was just and I know you really enjoyed that one. Just infiltrating and a little assassination and then a little sneaking and looting, and that's a lot of fun.
For sure. Yeah, the stealthy aspect of it, I really had a good chance to kind of channel my inner Sam Fisher, aspect, the stealthy ninja.
Fantasy Splinter Cell.
Exactly. Fantasy Splinter Cell.
And I'll read you the description. So rogues rely on skill, stealth, and their foes' vulnerabilities to get the upper hand in any situation. They have a knack for finding the solution to just about any problem, demonstrating a resourcefulness and versatility that is a cornerstone of any successful adventuring party.
Right.
And so they are really neat.
And again, we were talking about that utility of the paladin. Rogues have some major utility skills.
Absolutely. They can be experts in several different things. They're able to get into certain places. They're able to be charismatic and infiltrate.
With things like investigating, looking for traps, unlocking doors, unlocking loot chests.
Yeah.
There's lots of aspects like that can really come into play. I mean, because one of the, it's commonly known that one of the biggest struggles and most common enemies in D&D for characters are doors.
Yeah.
Trying to get through or past a door.
And sometimes they're just unlocked. I don't think you guys realize that.
Oh, no, for sure. Yeah, that's also a joke as well. That, you try to lockpick it and it doesn't work 14 times. And have you tried turning the knob?
Yeah.
Sometimes that'll work.
Sometimes it will. Yeah, not everybody's got an arcane lock on their bedroom.
Right.
So the rogue is also one of those that's always just kind of played like thief. I'm a thief. I'm an urchin, street urchin thief.
A thief or an assassin.
A thief or an assassin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many examples of rogues that are not just like your average thief in like other media.
Right.
Danny Ocean in Ocean's 11 is a rogue.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
And he's one of the I will even mention he's one of the subclasses I'm going to talk about.
Right.
They don't have to be some like super secret agent. They don't have to be whatever. I mean, they could even be
another example of that would like Captain Jack Sparrow.
Captain Jack Sparrow is there is a swashbuckler.
He has very roguish features to him. The charismatic, kind of soiree sort of personality can also fit into the aspects of rogue.
Yeah, like the highwayman. Like you can be the highwayman. You can be dressed up in frills. You can be the person that's just like one of making a Mass Effect reference because why not? In one of like the DLCs you get, there's a character like a crewmate you can recruit, and she's a thief, and she's really cool, and you have to infiltrate this party, and she's there, and she's doing the same thing, and it's fun because you can go to the party and put on the dress. You can act like you're really cool. You don't have to be just some like street urchin person.
Yeah,
you could be a rich person that became a rogue. Rogues get this really cool ability called sneak attack.
Yes.
And there's several ways you can get it, and I'm not going to get into it because even if you listen to like Critical Role, sometimes like even people have played their character as a rogue for a long time, they keep forgetting how they get it. So it's one of those things where it's better to learn about it from actually playing it, rather than me to give you the monopoly.
That's how I learned it quickest. Was just my first character I ever played was a rogue. And yeah, it took me a minute to kind of understand when and where and how sneak attack applied, because there are, and depending on which subclass you pick, it changes those stipulations.
Change those rules entirely, yeah. And so for the rogue especially, like they're able to do like a sneak attack, so they do this significant amount of damage added on to whatever their weapon
right
is.
The basic thing behind it is if you meet these certain requirements, are able to get the surprise or jump on somebody, or you have a teammate near somebody, and when you attack you do a significant amount more damage depending on what your level in rogue is.
And typically you don't have as many attacks, but you are able to hit hard when you need to.
Yes.
But you are squishy enough that you don't want to get hit yourself.
Exactly.
So my first subclass is the soul knife, and I think
you've mentioned this one a number of times.
I think just because I think it's so neat. Right. Who doesn't want to? Everybody loves when they see the bad guy or the good guy, and they form weapons just out of energy. Maybe, and this guy or girl, right? Gets to form psionic blades with their mind that they're able to use to attack. At random. So thinking of like in going back to the assassin trope or something to that effect, you can be like a government agent or something like that who's very James Bourne-esque. I had an idea for a soul knife.
Did you say James Bourne? Did you
Jason Bourne?
James Bond and Jason Bourne?
I did.
That's the ultimate spy.
Oh my God.
Oh, Jesus Christ, it's James Bourne.
Oh my. Yes. That's
my next character. That's my next D&D character. His name's James Bourne, the rogue.
So yeah, like Jason Bourne, James Bond could be very much rogues. They could be part of this organization
right.
or government. I have an idea for a Kenku, who are these little raven people. They're not very tall, and typically in the game they're not able to talk. They're able to mimic other people's sounds, which I think is neat.
Right.
And so they can mimic whatever you say. Or say things that they've heard recently, so they could put together a sentence, but it would sound like a bird talking. Where maybe it's 4 different people's voices all forming the same, forming the sentence.
I hate it. That's the only reference I can come up with off the top of my head. But the first thing pops in my head is Bumblebee from the Transformer movies.
Yes, exactly that. Playing them on the radio and taking a little bit of this, taking a little bit of that, and putting something together.
Exactly.
But the soul knife can do a lot of really interesting things. I imagine a Jason Bourne character as a Kenku who can't even really explain his background and doesn't remember it. Maybe he went on a boat to assassinate a guy, right? And he got shot full of arrows, and then he gets woken up, and but he's still a Kenku, so he can't even talk that well.
Oh my god!
And taking a feed or something like that, where he's at, I think. Let me see here. Is he able to talk to? I think they have an ability where they're able to but they also they definitely have an ability where they're able to throw their blades. Later levels are able to throw it and kind of teleport to there, and that's also something, Josh, where you could have a little bit of a Nightcrawler-esque.
You can throw it and then teleport to wherever your blade hits. Or,
yes.
Yeah, where.
And I don't think that's limited. Correct? I don't think there's any limitation to that. I don't think it's so many times per day or whatever. I think it's just ad hoc.
I'm not sure.
Oh no, I think you get specific dice, and you can use one of the dice for it actually. So you are limited to that.
Right.
But the teleportation, you get better attacks, and you're able to become invisible, just using the psychic weave, that kind of thing is awesome, and I love it. I think it's such a neat thing to have this guy, and you're where's your weapons, and boom, this little purple blade just coalesces out of nowhere.
Is that what Vex, or is it Vex or Vax in Vox Machina is played by Liam?
I don't think so.
His rogue, he can summon his daggers.
I think that's a specific dagger.
That's just a specific
that
dagger.
Would make sense. That's a magic dagger that he has, because they've already got magic weapons at that point.
Right.
So I love that one. And then the next subclass I'm going to go to is the Inquisitive. And the Inquisitive is very much what I imagine a Danny Ocean or something to that effect. They have they're able to hear deceit. They've got an eye for detail. They can tell how somebody is, at fighting. They can gain advantage from little things like that. You're able to, spot all types of different little things. And so I imagine if you wanted to have a kind of a mastermind character, essentially, and I think there is a mastermind class, but
yeah, this could kind of play into similarly to if you wanted a Sherlock Holmes character.
Yes, that as well.
Right. If you had a Sherlock Holmes, your previous life was a private investigator of some kind, or maybe you worked for a king in some kingdom.
You just did it for me right there. That is very good, because especially a la who's the guy that played Sherlock Holmes with is it Jude Law?
Yes, but
Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr. played Sherlock Holmes, and I like those movies.
Oh, me too.
And it was really cool, because you get the slow motion things, and very much in the Inquisitive, you see some of that, where he's able to
analyze the situation,
and go from there.
Right. That's cool. Well, okay, I'll add it to the list.
Yeah. And so the Inquisitive and the Soul Knife. There's a swashbuckler. Here's a character, right? Here's a character idea as a swashbuckler. Now, the swashbuckler has this ability, obviously the name is what it is, right?
It implies a pirate.
It implies a pirate, or, a
fencer, someone who's good at fencing.
Somebody that's a little bit, who's maybe a little cockhat. Imagine a tabaxi swashbuckler, with a little,
So Puss in Boots.
yes, that's exactly where I'm going. With a rapier, you could essentially, if you wanted to play Puss in Boots, you would play a Tabaxi
Swashbuckler.
Tabaxi swashbuckler,
Yeah.
and you could do that, or you can just make up your own character completely out of your own head, and that's what we also encourage. But so rogues, super good at doing things, experts at a lot of different things, and really one of the best characters to best utility characters to bring to a party.
Definitely. It's one of those things that you can tell a difference in your adventuring party if you with a rogue and without a rogue.
Very
Especially
much
if you're going into a lot of buildings and searching for treasure and stuff. You can kind of tell that difference.
Yeah, very, very much. And then, obviously they're the ultimate, hey, I'll sneak in and I'll find out,
Right. I'll go recon the area and see what's going on.
The next class, Sorcerer.
Yes.
Ooh.
The Doctor Strange of classes.
Yeah, kind of, sort of. Yeah, they're very...
Well, he was the Sorcerer Supreme.
He was the Sorcerer Supreme.
In time till...
what I saw somewhere, though, is that... I think I was looking at something, and when they built him as a wizard, I think. But the guy, one that can stop time and do all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So versus the actual sorcerer himself, but there is one that sounds a lot like him. One of the sorcerer options,
right?
The one where you have the clocks and
Clockwork Soul.
The Clockwork Soul, that would be it.
Yeah.
So sorcerer is one of my favorites. I think it's neat. You don't have access to as many spells or that type of thing, but as you
got a good bit of spells in the Sorcerer Handbook.
You do. You get a good deal of spells. You just don't learn as many. You don't have as many total,
I see what you're saying.
which is fine. I think if you're a DM and you have a sorcerer, you should probably give them a few extra spells. Because if a bard can have more spells than a sorcerer, then that's just kind of sad, I think. So the sorcerers carry a magical birthright conferred upon them by an exotic bloodline, some unworldly influence or exposure to unknown cosmic forces. No one chooses sorcery. The power chooses the sorcerer.
Oh, mysterious.
Very, yeah. So, something in your background has given you this just innate ability to cast magical spells. You didn't have to go to a school. You didn't have to study. You were just kind of
you didn't even necessarily have to, give your soul to a demon of some kind or some type of pact, anything.
That comes later.
It does.
The sorcerer gets this. My first subclass that I really like, and we have a character that plays it in our campaign, is the Storm Sorcerer.
Yes.
Because Tempest Cleric, Storm Sorcerers, just cool. It's cool to have that power
when
of
you can
lightning.
Freaking call a lightning bolt from the heavens down to strike your enemies. There's few things cooler than that.
Yes, there is very few. It is super neat. I love it. I love the way that Matt plays the character in our game.
Mm-hmm.
He has a sailor background. I'm not going to get into his background because you don't know what his history is, and I don't want to do that to you because there's some mystery to that. But, he has a sailor background, and something in his past, right, inflicted this on him. And he slowly, over time, he learned to master some of it. And now he's becoming a very competent spellcaster.
Right.
And just the abilities that you have, like being able to, at first level, you have a little bit of a get out of dodge where you're able to fly if you cast a level spell over first level or higher, right? Mm-hmm. If you cast a burning hands or something to that effect, you're able to fly 10 feet in the air. So, there's a lot of utility that you could be fly over their head. Maybe you would fly to a ledge, right?
Yeah, on top of a building. Yeah, just to get out of their reach.
Yeah, there's so much utility in that, and I love that. Being having low hit points as a sorcerer, it's nice to be able to get out of there.
Sure.
Where being able to you gain languages. Those are always fun for RP. You gain Primordial. We're able to speak. Primordial consists of 4 different languages, so you get kind of 4 different things.
That's a really satisfying thing in D&D is when you've been playing a campaign for a while and you come across some kind of obscure creature or bad villain of some kind. And they start, muttering to you in this really obscure language, and no one knows what's going on, and they think they have the upper hand. And the DM asks, do any of you speak Primordial or Celestial, whatever this obscure language is? And that one person's like, I do. I know exactly what they're saying.
I know exactly what they're saying. Yeah, I can. And maybe I even got a feed. I can read their lips.
Right.
That is fun. That is fun for you guys because it is something maybe they're insulting you. That adds and then what wasn't even intended to be a fight turns into, you know, a 35-minute
I heard
thing.
what you called
I
me.
heard what you called. Yeah, and then it starts a whole thing, and that's the beauty of D&D, and that's why we like it so much.
Yeah.
The sorcerer also, like later on, they're able to kind of control weather around them. You know, they can control rain in like a certain radius. So like, you know, if you guys wanted to stay dry, you can do it. If you want to control snow like falling, you could do it as long as it's like in a certain radius around you. Then the ability I think is really neat too is when you're casting a spell that does like thunder damage or lightning damage, some of that energy it almost becomes out, and you can like actually do a little bit of damage to a bunch of different foes around.
It arcs off onto other people.
Yeah, which I think is super neat as well. Obviously, being able to fly, super cool. That comes at like a later level,
right?
Where you're able to just take off and fly because you have the power of wind. The wind is you. You are the wind.
Exactly.
Bullseye. And, you know, before that too, though, there is the one where if you get hit, you can kind of just like give them a rebuttal with like lightning or thunder damage, right? And just send them flying back.
Exactly.
And that's always cool. And so, you know, being Storm from X-Men.
I was going to mention that.
Or something.
She's a good example of a storm sorcerer.
Yes, very much. Yeah. And it's just neat. It's just a really neat, you know, and you could play somebody that's like a super primordial thing. You could mix Storm Sorcerer with like Tempest Cleric, right? So Tempest Clerics have an ability at level 2 where they're able to channel their divinity and just roll max damage for any lightning spell, right?
Oh, shoot. So yeah, you cast Lightning Bolt.
You cast a high-level Lightning Bolt and then channel the divinity. Even if they save, you're still doing probably 40, 50 damage.
Shoot.
Right? So you have the ability to just do that kind of thing. And I think that's an interesting multi-class, you know, where you're like born into it and you start serving a god or something to that effect. And then it's two different casting things, but there's a lot of RP that could be done there.
Oh,
the Storm Sorcerers are just really, really neat. I like that. I've always just been a sucker for lightning damage and thunder damage. It's just like a cool, to me, like fire's really cool, and I have nothing against fire damage. Yeah. But it's just one of those things that's just so done. Like it's done so often that I never latched onto. I mean, everybody else was into it.
I have a multi-class in a fire sorcery character in one of our things.
You do,
you know, and it's fun. I enjoy it for sure. But yeah, there's something particular about that, like lightning damage, especially, you know. And thinking about, you know, in alternate ways to use that, you know, you're trying to convince somebody, you know, to let some slaves go or, you know, whatever it may be, and you want to intimidate them, roll an intimidation check, you know, just because you feel like spending it, you spend a spell slot and call lightning behind you, just as you say, let them go or something.
Oh, yeah.
As to get like, you know, an advantage on an intimidation check. Like that's really intimidating.
Yes.
Yeah. As soon as you command your word, you know, the skies grow dark and then lightning strikes, you know, at your will. There's a few things that could scare people, you know, quicker than that.
Yeah. I like that. I love that. There's you know, sorcerers need, and then, you know, getting to the bottom of like why your powers are what they are too is fun. That's a fun, you know, DMs should always be looking to, if the player's up for it. Some players don't want to write a big backstory. Some players don't really want to explore their own character. They just want to, I'm in the game, I don't really want a lot of attention, right? That's fine. But as a DM, you should look into it, and it seems like they are, then you should maybe start to explore on that some more and give them some things that, like, why do they have this sorcerer power?
And again, if you've got a DM, you know, that's worth their while, you know, I'm sure that, you know, if you talk to them, they'd be happy to help you, you know, expand your background and help you come up with, you know, ways to connect it in with the story and to come up with even characters from your past.
You know, I've already mentioned, like, as a fledgling writer, one of the things I like about DMing is it allows me to write a book and I don't have to write it alone. I can set the world.
That's a good point.
I can give you guys some, you know, problems, and then really I don't have to write the action, you know, because you guys do that yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can give you subplots, I can give you things of interest, but it's up to you to take the hook on it. And it's up to you to, like, do I kill this guy or do I let him go? Do I, you know, do this or do I do that? Do we fight these guys or do we not? You know, that's your choice. And I don't have to write that. I don't have to write out an action scene.
It really is a choose your own adventure book.
It really is. And so I love that. I love that I can create a world that I like, that I think is neat, put you guys in it, and say, all right.
Set you free.
Set you free a little bit.
Yeah. See what you make of it.
Yes.
In this playground of the world you've made.
And with that said, I want you to also like my world, and I want you to be involved.
Oh, of course.
And you know what? You get to help me world build a little bit too if you have something really interesting.
It's true.
or not even, if as long as you have something that you like. I'm not going to build like a whole gingerbread,
the
gingerbread house kingdom, in my world. But if you,
but what about the gumdrop buttons?
What about them? Yeah,
hey, can't forget the gumdrop buttons.
Maybe it'll be like a micro world, like a little like, teeny tiny world.
Oh, the big bad villain.
The big bad.
You go into the gingerbread, town, and you talk to the tavern keep. Ask if there's any trouble amidst, and he just kind of leans in close. Do you know the Muffin Man? And
the one that lives on Drury Lane.
Exactly. We know the story from there.
We do. So I can put you there if you want. So the next subclass that I'll bring up is the Shadow Magic subclass for Sorcerer. And this one's just cool because you get kind of like this just dark, ominous type of thing. Like you're cold to the touch, your heart never beats, you're able to see really far. You can cast darkness on yourself and see inside of it. You can, magical darkness. You get this like kind of like hellhound type thing that's, follows you around and obeys your command. And just like a shadow monk, you can kind of zip from point to point in the shadows. And so you embracing the darkness, like you could be somebody that like, maybe my parents worshipped the goddess of the moon or something like that, and I've got this, maybe it's not a hellhound, maybe it's like a cute little puppy dog, but I like this one because you can get kind of like this really edgy sorcerer,
Right. You could make an emo sorcerer if you want to.
Yes, very much so. Very emo sorcerer. If they had any ability in martial, imagine them like cupping their hands to make a shadow, or reaching over to a wall where there's a shadow and casting Shadow Blade. And as they pull back, you just see this blade emerge. As the blade
emerges between the Buried and Me starts playing.
Yes.
And yeah, it's pretty epic.
So interesting class. I think it's just one that I would have a lot of fun in, is why I brought it up. I think some of them, like the Draconic Source, the Draconic Sorcerer is cool. The Clockwork Souls,
right. Yeah, my particular one I talked about that I play is it's from a different book. It's not from the base subclasses and things, but it's the Phoenix Sorcery.
Mm-hmm.
And that one, you've got this spirit of the Phoenix within you, that's where your magic is channeling from. And the way that I'm playing it is, and I know often a lot of the way a lot of people play sorcerers is they have this, growing surge of magic within them that they're always, trying to stay ahead of, to keep control over before it consumes them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the concept behind my Phoenix Sorcery. As this flame grows hotter and hotter, my power becomes more unwieldy.
And I haven't asked you this yet, Josh, and you don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but with your Phoenix Sorcerer, do your tears have magical healing properties just like Harry Potter? The Phoenix from there?
Well, I didn't know that was a thing, so I'm probably going to say maybe.
Ooh, so I just got to make you cry.
We'll see. I might make that might be canon now. I'll have to think about that.
So speaking of edgy, we're going to get into the next class,
yes.
which is the edgiest of classes. And if you guys don't have bandages handy, grab them, because you might just get cut, because we are walking the razor sharp edge of the Warlock. The Warlock is made through a pact. They gain their magic through making a pact with another entity. And there are numerous subclasses for that. The actual description reads, the Warlocks are seekers of the knowledge that lies hidden in the fabric of the multiverse. Through pacts made with mysterious beings of supernatural magic, Warlocks unlock magical effects, both subtle and spectacular. So
they're from the multiverse as well.
Indeed. I think Warlocks are pretty cool. Originally, they were one of the classes that I didn't have any interest in.
They are another one I haven't, because I know there were so many options. In a little bit, we've talked about them, the different things that they can, their invocations.
Yeah, so the Warlock has, they make a pact with an entity, right? And there's certain, maybe it's the Old One, and you decide who the Great Old One is. Maybe, a lot of people go with Cthulhu or something to that effect.
Yeah,
but you can
Stanley. It could be anybody.
It could be anybody. Yes, it could be anybody. It could, something that's out there is usually some type of ancient madness. It's obviously somebody powerful enough to grant you magic that you're able to cast.
Again,
spells.
Stanley, but
yes.
Anyway.
Yes. Well, he gives you webbing. Spider-Man Warlock. Let's do it.
And Excelsior.
So the first subclass I like, and this is from the, I think this is from Xanathar's Guide to Everything. So this isn't one of the base classes you get in just the player's handbook. And it's kind of like one of the more popular ones. It's kind of the one that everybody plays if they want to play a martial warlock, and that's the Hexblade. So the Hexblade gets their power from like a sentient weapon, like a magical sentient weapon with like, powers from like the Shadow Realm or something to that effect. It grants you power, and so, I have a character that I played for like a couple of episodes of a campaign before the campaign got shut down, where my character was part of a military order who were all Hexblades, and they would cut their thumbs and bleed onto the weapon as part of their pact, and then the weapon would give them power to like defend. It was like kind of like a weapon of the kingdom essentially, and he was like a Shatter Kai warlock. He's a Shatter Kai elf, so he already comes from like the Shadowfell, really edgy, really dark, but they get really cool powers. They get really, it's fun to play as them because you can really have a powerful martial class, because instead of using strength or dexterity, you can use your spellcasting modifier as charisma and who doesn't also want to like have a weapon that you can just appear out of nowhere. Very similar to like we're talking about with like Vex.
Yes.
You if you want to have a long sword that just appears out of shadows, you shake your hand and there's a sword,
and that's useful if you were to be captured or something. They can't really take that away from you.
Yep, they definitely can't take it away from you. You get a list where you get a couple of these spells. The problem is it's kind of like a trap. Some of the spells that you get as a warlock, you only get to choose like one spell per level, I think, or two spells per level. I think it's just one, and they give you these spells that like, hey, this is like extended spell list to choose from, but they don't. Most other classes, when they give that to you, they just put the spells in your thing. Like, oh, you'll get these at different levels. These ones you just have to choose against all the other warlock spells, and so they can be kind of tricky sometimes. But being able to revive somebody, like being able to like turn somebody into a zombie, being able to do the damage with the charisma modifier, and then matching that with some of the invocations where you have like Eldritch Smite or something to that effect, where you can like do significant amount of damage with like a single blow. It's just a lot of fun. I like the idea of it. My guy had like a thunder step, and he also had misty, like a kind of like a shadow step as well. So he was able to move very quick across the battlefield, and he had a little double scimitar, and it was my take on a really edgy dark elf. Nice. Darth Maul.
Oh, right. That's cool.
So I liked that one. It was fun. It's an interesting one to play. Most people just multi-class into it, especially with Paladin. I don't have anything against that. Whatever. If it makes your character more powerful. I will say this, though. I think it is important that you play into your oath and your pact. What if the pact is wanting you to change, like, what your actual oath is?
They're two opposing forces pulling you in different directions.
They can be. That's right. You could have entities from like the same kind of thing where you maybe make your oath to one organization, and then there's a person in that organization that grants you powers, but they can be opposing things. And I think there can be like an interesting dichotomy there where they start to pull you in different directions, and you as a character have to really decide what you want to do with that.
True. That could lead to some interesting character development through a campaign, though, having, trying to make those decisions, that kind of renegade and paragon sort of dichotomy there.
Yeah. How do we keep it going? The next subclass for them is that I really like is the Celestial.
Right.
And this one's neat just because you get some cool like utility spells. So a lot of my secondary classes are more utility oriented, and this one you have the ability to heal people. You get some spells from the cleric spell list, which are really good. Things like Guiding Bolt, like you automatically, as a warlock, we're not going to really explain spell slots in this, but the warlock always casts the most powerful. They only have access to powerful spells for a short period of time in the day, essentially, or they can only cast so many spells in a day versus other casting classes, but they always cast it at the highest level that any other class could cast at there, right? So if you're a 5th level warlock, you're going to be you can't cast a spell lower than 3rd level. Right, it's at 3rd level. It automatically every time. So there are some spells like Guiding Bolt, which clerics might not want to use at like a higher level. and you could really just, you know what, I'm gonna throw this guiding bolt in there. I'm gonna do a ton of damage with like a 5th level or 6th level guiding bolt.
Right.
And those are cool. That's also just a fun one. Like maybe you made a pact with an angel, or make a pact with some type of like, you know, other angelic entity. Right. And that's where you get your power from. And you don't have to be as edgy now. So Hexblade, really edgy, dark shadow, blah, 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 blah. Celestial, light, heavier, a little bit better. You know, maybe you're a doctor, you know, and to save somebody, you made a pact with somebody who was like an angel in disguise, touched by an angel. They were in town.
Hey, there you go.
And they, you know,
or, you know, you had a near-death experience.
Ooh, I like
where,
that one too.
You know, you died at some point and came in contact with these, you know, heavenly beings. And you talk to one of them and you're like, hey, you want to give me some awesome powers? And you're like, sure.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Nothing in return.
No, that's all it takes.
Warlocks should have something they have to do in return. And that is important. You know, you should talk, as your DM, you should talk to your warlock as the entity, as their pact entity, and try to like, hey, you're not on course, you know? And, you know, if you need to take their powers away and make them class as something else or
remember,
something
you're working for me.
You're working for me. Listen here, see, like, there's the Scarface, who not Al Pacino. I'm talking about like the gangster Scarface from the 20s, 30s. Anyways, baby Al Capone.
I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Al Capone. You could be like the Al Capone entity. I like the one. There's one I'm thinking about creating that I've seen before, and I don't like the way it was done, but I'm interested in doing it. And it's where you're your own patron, just from the future.
Oh,
and you're like bestowing powers to your younger self, you know? I think that's an interesting
That
one.
would be cool.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And then you could take them away from them for like a short period of time so they have to grow, and it's really you.
Right.
So I like that idea.
I want you to make better decisions now than I did when I was in your place.
Well, I remember I needed this, you know, like I was there. I was there, Gandalf. Exactly. I remember. And speaking of Gandalf.
Oh, true.
We're coming to our last class.
Yeah.
And it is
the almighty wizard.
Wizards.
Yes. You're a wizard now.
You're a wizard, Harry. Wizards are like the preeminent magic users, right?
Oh, yeah.
They are smart. They use intelligence. They love spells, and they love learning spells, and they are out there. They are just consumers of knowledge. Wizards are supreme magic users, defined and united as a class by the spells they cast. Drawing on the subtle weave of magic that permeates the cosmos, wizards cast spells of explosive fire, arcing lightning, subtle deception, brute force, mind control, and much more. They have the ability to learn more spells than any other caster.
Mm-hmm.
They have the ability to cast some of the most powerful spells in the game.
Yes.
And they're able to recover spells. So they're able to cast more spells in a day than most people are.
Right. But they're also a real squishy.
Really squishy, which is fine. You don't want to be a sorcerer that's in combat. Or do you? Well, maybe we'll come to that in a second.
A wizard.
Oh, wizard. Oh,
yeah.
Well, yes, you don't want to be a wizard that's in combat and hand-to-hand combat for the most part. That's not your ideal place to be. Yes. And, you know, this is one of those things where I talk about that you should start at level 3 for campaigns, because if you had a Gandalf-esque character and they weren't going through some type of rebirth, right? But they're just like, I'm playing the wizard with the pointy hat and the long beard, and I'm starting at level 1. And I'm supposed to be this old dude who's like a master of magic, but I'm level 1. I don't know anything.
Right.
So you should at least start at level 3, where they've got a little bit better like grasp on things, and they've at least learned what their subclass is.
Right.
And honestly, you know, if somebody wants to play an old wizard, go for it. But you know, you have so many places you can go with this. There are so many adaptations, and there's so many places to really make the wizard yours. And a lot of them deal with the specific classes of magic, like necromancy or transmutation or evocation, which is like the damaging type of spells.
Yes.
But there are a few other subclasses which are not school related, right? And the first one I want to talk about is the Order of Scribes. And this is one that I think a lot of people overlook. I like it because I immediately, when I read it, I had an idea for what I wanted. I had an idea for this Witcher-esque, like, you know, with the wizards or sorcerers from the Witcher universe.
Yeah.
You know, I had an idea for, like, you know, they sacrifice their students, you know, they put them into like the eel pit, you know, and they channel their magical energy. And I imagined something similar, but them putting students into spell books. Yes. And you get this spell book that you can like use, that you can use as like it's almost like a companion. You talk to it, and eventually you can like get this thing called the awaken or the manifest mind, where you actually are able to like manifest maybe a book, maybe falling text or whatever, some type of like, you know, kind of little, it's almost like you get your own familiar but it's as a non-spell type of thing. And I imagine
it's not something you cast.
It's not something you cast, and it's just your special ability. I imagine like a Cortana from Halo, like having this awakened mind who was one of your one of your fellow peers, you know, and they are in your spell book, and maybe they appear as like falling texts, you know, in like a vaguely humanoid form,
right,
and they're able to fly around and scout for you. They can cast spells from that location. You also get the you know, one of the early things you get is you get to pull out this little wizardly quill. Like you can just kind of poof, there's a quill in your hand, right, and it writes in any color. There's no ink needed. And all these other classes, for the most part, like if they have a school attached to them, that specific school, it's easier for them to put that magic. It's way quicker and costs less to put those spells in their spell book. The Scribe's Wizard, every single school gets that ability. So you're able to shorten the time and cast and write things in your spell book way quicker. So between those two things, I get the idea of like this, you know, like really innocent dude who's got like, you know, this peer who is like sacrificed, and maybe he didn't want that to happen. He's got, you know, this girl he loved or his best friend, and they are kind of like the manifested mind that are in his spell book, you know, they are there to serve him like a Cortana. And that's an issue as well. You know, he's got his little buddy he's talking to when he's not around his friends, and he's able to use it for a lot of different things. And I really, really like it. You can also do like magical scrolls with them. They're like they're the main person. Like if you want to make a magic scroll, you're able to do that like once a day. Only you can cast it, but it's like an easy way to get an extra spell slot, essentially. Right.
To me, wizards are one of those class too that I think fall really good into people who are like, you know, being heavy on the RP stuff. I think there's a lot of variety and a lot of space as a wizard to really get into some of that RP aspects, you know, particularly on, you know, how you describe, you know, you're using these components for the spells and the actions you're taking and the words, you know, the vocal aspects of the spells you're saying, and just this whole, you know, going out to find the materials to write, you know, to put in your spell book and to write these spells down. There's a lot to kind of to be said for that. And, you know, obviously, you know, we're right on the heels of Hogwarts Legacy coming out. You know, the, you know, Wizarding World is very hyped right now and stuff. So, you know, if you're really into that, you know, Wizard might be, you know, obviously an obvious great place to start. They're a little complicated to play, learn how the spell systems works, but
your DM will help you with that.
Exactly.
But a good DM will, even a mediocre DM will help you with all that.
But they can be definitely very fun with all the different schools of magic that you can, you know, tap into. And there's, you know, there's, you know, vast hundreds and hundreds of spells. There's a lot of creativity there as far as how you use them.
Yeah. And I think, you know, what we were talking about too, when you're talking about using all of those components, you know, there's two different types of things that you're able to use in Dungeons and Dragons to cast spells. There is kind of like that component where there are things that you have to use, like maybe you pull out like an eel's, you know, tentacle.
Right. And a feather from a bird.
A feather from a bird, and you can cast Featherfall. There are also some things like, you know, when you're casting Revivify or something like that, where you use a 300.
You have to have a diamond worth 300 gold.
Worth 300 gold, and it destroys the diamond in the process, right?
Yes.
So those kind of things are really neat. And I think nobody did that better than Liam from Critical Role with his character Caleb Widowgast in season 2, because he didn't go the cheap route and just say, I use my arcane focus. Like he you know, every single time he's like, I pull out bat guano and rub it across my hands, and a firebolt emerges, and, you know.
Yeah, like very descriptive in every single spell that's cast. And I loved that about his character.
Yeah, it was as a listener, very entertaining.
It painted a picture for you what you were seeing and stuff, which in an audio, you know, format and stuff like that, that's very useful.
Yeah, very, very fun to listen to. So if you've never listened to Critical Role, I suggest Critical Role Campaign 2 if you're looking for a good wizard. Caleb Widowgast, played by Liam,
for sure.
He does an amazing job. I talked about like, hey, wizards shouldn't be fighting in melee, but there is one. That can.
Yes.
And they are called the Blade Singer.
Indeed.
And traditionally, they're written as kind of like elven-esque, like you're able to channel like this elven-esque music or slack. I imagine it more of like a dance or a kata, from like a martial arts thing.
Right.
And one of my favorite like ideas is like a loxodon, which is an elephant.
Oh yeah, the big elephant guys.
A big elephant who's doing like all these like really ornate dance moves while holding like a chain flail, and he's spinning it around. And I imagine like the flail being like having like elephants on it, and there's holes drilled in certain things that as he's swinging around, it makes different whistling noises as it's going. And so they have really cool things that they can do. They obviously get proficiency with like a weapon that you normally couldn't get as a wizard. You are able to like increase how hard it is to hit you, which is insane. If you have a high intelligence modifier, you are very hard to hit. You become faster. You are able to, have advantage on dexterity saving throws. And then just at 6th level, you can make an extra attack. And not only that, one of the attacks can be one of your level 0 spells, one of your cantrips. So you can cast Booming Blade and hit somebody and then hit him again,
Dude, being a wizard and getting an extra attack, that's what's up.
It's killer. It's killer. And so you're able to like, use the Blade Song. You can use your reaction to like expend one of your spell slots and reduce the damage by an amount equal. So if you spend like a 4th level spell slot and you get hit for 18 damage, you can essentially remove 20 damage.
Wow.
Right? So it's a cool one. Obviously, maybe you shouldn't do it all the time. You should still have a focus on it. But the idea that you're not just some pipsqueak,
right.
that you have the ability to actually do something.
You are a battle mage.
A little bit, yeah, like a little bit. And if you multi-class with an Eldritch Knight or something to that effect.
I was just thinking about that. Yeah, a good pairing for a multi-class in that, just to get some of those Blade Song features, and then to pair that up with something else to just make a really tough wizard of some kind.
Yeah, I imagine, that Loxodon, I always imagined him as like a magical artifact recovery person. So he knows, rather than use all his spells, like, he's able to go into a dungeon and he can take on a few zombies or a few skeletons, right? And
I just thought of something. I guess that's something too that could be up to your DM. If you had a blade singing wizard and your race was a turtle.
Oh yeah, you were so hard to hit, it's insane.
Yeah, because like your natural shell, you already had an AC of like
17.
Yeah, and then if you have an intelligence of like 20, good Lord.
Yeah,
dude, you're gonna.
And then you cast a shield spell.
You have like an AC of 30.
Yes.
Wow.
So that is a super powerful class. But
yeah, it is.
We've obviously gone on for a really long time. We've talked about a lot of stuff, and as you can tell, we love this. It's one of our favorite pastimes. And it's something that we want to share with a lot of people.
I knew going into this episode, it was definitely going to be a longer, more in-depth involved one, but I'm okay with that because, like you said, yeah, we're both really into this, and there is so much to it, it just by its nature and all the different aspects of Dungeons and Dragons. There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and it's culturally inappropriate for me to hold someone down and like just explain every single rule to them. And like how much fun it is, and just try it, bro. Just try it. Just try it. Exactly. Just try it. Just trust me. Just try it.
Yeah.
Roll these dice. Just trust me. But it is so much fun. It is like when you play with a good group, and luckily I've only really ever played with good groups. When you play and you're in an RPG session, it's one of those things that where really nothing else matters in the world.
Yes.
You are so wrapped up into it, and just like reading a book.
Yeah.
It's one of those things like using your imagination.
Right. And I know for a lot of people, and especially even for me, like I was hesitant to it for a long time because it's just the thought of, the act of role playing or, pretending to be somebody else like this or that. Some people are very hesitant to D&D because it's, they say it's nerdy or it's childish or whatever. But that's, if you have any hesitation with that for any of those reasons or any other reasons, I would suggest to maybe try to set some of that aside because I went into it with a lot of that, and it takes a while when you're new to it to kind of get used to, doing that role-playing aspect and pretending to be this other character, but it is really, really fun once you get into it and you start to, get a feel for what this character acts like and sounds like, and, you get to take a break from, the toil and trouble of, your daily life and just escape to this fantasy world and go on an epic adventure, of grand scale. And it's really led to a lot of good times with some friends over the past couple of years that we remember specific moments, and we're creating these memories together. And, every week we look forward to the next time we get to play because we get to make these new memories.
It's one of the funnest things we do. Video games are fun. I love video games. I love reading books. I love watching new movies. But
yeah,
you can make any of those things. Like we talked about earlier, there's a Star Wars, we talked about last week. There's a Star Wars 5e where you play like Star Wars stuff. You can build this system into a bunch of different things, cyberpunk, whatever, and be able to play these cool classes or whatever.
Even if you don't,
those worlds.
Yeah, even if you don't like the fantasy setting, elves and knights and wizards and sorcerers. Yeah, make it sci-fi. Make it, you have a crew that's on a spaceship traveling the galaxy. You've got lasers and, all kinds of futuristic stuff.
I love it. I think it's one of the funnest things to do. And I will say, going back to your RP thing, role playing, I think there's on the other hand too, if you do get into it and you're so into it and you're really good at RPing and you find that there's somebody else out there that's not doing as good a job or they seem kind of scared about it, just encourage them to do it.
Yeah.
And don't be
pushy.
Don't be pushy, but let them, and then also give them a time to shine. Like maybe ask them the question because they're the person that doesn't talk a whole lot. Maybe they're just looking for that. Because just like anybody else, even we're RPing as these people that we aren't, we still bring a lot of ourselves with it. And so if somebody is shy, make sure that, you're doing a good job of like helping them to want to play it.
Right.
And another thing I'll bring up too as a DM, make sure that you're doing a good job, DMs and other players, that we're not like, there's a lot of women that are playing it now that are getting into it, and we've been really lucky because we've had really good people. And make sure that if you're a DM or if you're a player and there's somebody being creepy with somebody else,
being toxic,
it doesn't have to be a female, but I think females are one of those people. They've been gate kept at the geek world for a while,
right?
And now we're seeing this resurgence. We're seeing tons of girl gamers playing video games online. We're seeing lots of people getting into like Dungeons and Dragons or really opening up about their other fandoms, like their book fandoms and stuff, and they're kind of like the one experts in those fields a lot of times.
Sure.
That we've that some people this is on TV now, I really like it, but these people have been on top of it for a long time. Make sure that you're not being creepy, you're not allowing someone to be a jerk to someone.
Exactly.
Make sure your DM's not being a jerk to someone, and if they are, dump them.
Right.
Or if a group is horrible and they're toxic, just get out of there.
If you're in a game that has any kind of toxicity to it, or people are just they're not doing good, and you don't have to stay in it.
No. And this is one of the more welcoming like fandoms, quote unquote, that I've found. I talked about in my top 10 video games episode 2, I talked about The Squad. It's a PC game and there's a little bit of RP. It's not really RP, but you have to talk to your friends. You have to talk to these random strangers. And if you just tell them like, hey, I'm new, tell me what I need to do, they will guide you. And the same thing with Dungeons and Dragons. This is not one of the don't be scared by what I said earlier about the things that can happen, because I've never run into it personally, but I know other people have.
I've heard of it, but I haven't ever experienced it myself.
And so it's just a word of advice. If you're male, female, whatever, and you want to get into Dungeons and Dragons, there's a place for you. There's a table for you. Go on Roll20, go look for open games. Apply for them, or send the person a message and see what you think. Yeah. And, this is also one of the things, we are planning on talking about all kinds of stuff on this podcast. So many different things, martial arts, paranormal, books, video games, movies, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. TV series. But we're planning on in the future having an ancillary related podcast.
Yeah. Some supplemental content.
That is just Dungeons and Dragons. It's running a campaign, a long form campaign with a custom world where that you guys can also dive into and play, maybe play along or play on your own in the future. And I think that'll be fun and hopefully a way that you guys can connect with us.
Right. That's one of those things where it opens the opportunity, if you're a subscriber on our Patreon, patreon.com/geeketc podcast, we'll, once we start that campaign, we'll have a feature in there that if you're, a certain level patron, your name, could be an NPC or a character in the campaign, which is always awesome.
I think a giveaway for like Patreons as well. Like I'd be happy to design a one shot and play them for patrons.
Yeah,
I think that could be interesting.
That could be
Play with me
awesome.
and you both. You know, you could run a game, or I could run a
sit
game
in on
and
one shot.
Sit in on one shot, like as almost like a giveaway.
That's awesome.
I think that would be a lot of fun. Hopefully you found some of this entertaining. Some, you know, it's remember, as always, Geek ETC is two best friends who've been best friends for a long time, talking about things that they enjoy. And we hope that you will continue to follow us, that you'll go to Geek ETC Podcast, or at Geek ETC Podcast on Instagram, at Geek ETC Podcast on Twitter.
Right. And YouTube as well, youtube.com.
And youtube.com. There's some gameplay footage out there now from Josh for the Hogwarts gaming and
Hogwarts
Legacy. And, you know, we are in this for the long haul. We really want to hear from you guys more than anything. We want to know what you like, because it's nice when people that you listen to on your daily drive or on your road trip or while you're working out or whatever, when they connect with you. And we're not special, but we want you to feel like you are.
There you go. That's what's up. Well, yeah, that'll do it for this week. We'll be back next week with some new topics, some new discussions, some new geeky things to dive into.
Just make sure we team up together. Geeks fight better together.
We do. Keep geeking out.